Pirate God Level Cartoonist, Chapter 241 to 260. Chapter 241 Brain Butterfly, Neptune. It didn't take long for Roha to come to the Dragon Palace Castle, surrounded by Princess Otoji and many guards. And King Neptune, who had been waiting for a long time, came to the door in person to welcome Roha. After a few simple greetings, the banquet was officially held. This world is far from the red tape of the previous life. Even if it was such a grand banquet, Neptune, the king, only gave a few simple speeches, introduced Roha to everyone, and expressed his gratitude, and then stepped down from the throne. And Roha also really saw a fantastic performance. The mermaid dancer with beautiful appearance and enchanting figure danced in the hall. The huge lineup of the mermaid ensemble plays fascinating music with the unique instruments of the Murlocs. Roha sat by the throne, tasting the delicious high point that once conquered Bigmom in the future, and beat the beat gently with the palm of the music. It has to be said that the appearance of Murloc women is truly the best of all races in the world. Whether it is the delicate and white skin is creamy, the slender waist, the heavy mountain peaks, and the eyes as deep as the sea, it is enough to make every human who sees a mermaid for the first time completely addicted. How is it, brother Roha? Our mermaid girl is not bad. Nipton, who was sitting beside Roha, touched Roha quietly, his face full of constriction. Who would have thought that Neptune, who is the king of a country, was like a big boy who didn't grow up on weekdays, without the majesty that a king should have? It's really good. Roha nodded with a light smile, but his eyes involuntarily glanced at the corner of the hall. Behind the pillar in the corner of the hall, a huge little girl was hiding behind the pillar, looking at Roha timidly, her eyes full of exploration and worship. Aware of Roha's gaze, Baixing screamed in a low voice, and withdrew his head with a swipe, leaving only the big pink tail exposed outside the pillar, slapping continuously, showing the panic of the master. Neptune, who has always been concerned about all Roha's movements, of course noticed Roha's gaze. Looking at the shy Shirahoshi, Neptune smiled heartily and beckoned to Shirahoshi. White Star, come here. Toast your benefactor. Juice. At the end, Neptune also introduced to Roha, that's my daughter Shirahoshi. Don't look at her so big, that's because she's a huge scorpion mermaid. In fact, she's only 7 years old today. Well, father. On the other side, upon hearing Neptune's call, Baixing swam over with a glass of juice, his face as red as a red apple. Coming to Roha, Shirahoshi glanced at Roha shyly, then hurriedly lowered his head and raised the juice in his hand. You. At hello, I am Baixing, thank you for saving my mother. The mother. Baixing tremblingly raised the juice in his hand, the heat on his face rose as if white smoke was about to rise. For a child of her age, to be so close to the object of her worship, she was so ashamed that she could not wait to get into the ground. You're welcome, Princess Baixing. Luoya smiled lightly, clinking glasses with Baixing, and immediately drank the wine in the glass. Looking at Shirahoshi who hurriedly drinking juice in front of him, Roha couldn't help but smile. In his mind, Baixing has always been the #1 beauty in this world, and his pure temperament makes him particularly fond of it. However, I like it in my heart, but Roha has not had any other thoughts about Shirahoshi for the time being. Not to mention that Baixing is only a 7-year-old loli, just her huge size is a problem. As soon as this time came, Roha missed the mechanical cat and all kinds of magic animations. Be sure to get the shrinking light. If you really can't do it, just draw a magic comic and learn how to become giant or shrink. Looking at Roha's straight gaze, the red brush on Shirahoshi's face spread, and even spread to the neck. In the end, Baixing let out a coquettish whimper and hurried away wagging his tail. Neptune, who was on the side, glanced at Roha with a strange expression, and twitched the corner of his mouth. He didn't know what to say, but his mind began to make up for it. This Roha, isn't it because of Shirahoshi? Also, my family Baixing is so gentle and kind, and looks so cute, you can tell at a glance that she must be a great beauty in the future, and it is normal to be seen by others. No matter how good-looking Bai Xing is, she is only 7 years old. I must have misunderstood. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. 9 flowers. However, I heard that there are several underage girls in Roha's family, the youngest is only 11 years old. Could it be? Is he really a pervert? What if Roha wants to marry Shirahoshi? Fight. Surely he won't be able to beat him, and the people who call on the entire Fishman Island can't beat him. So, book a baby kiss. This Roha looks good, and his strength is even more top-notch. He is indeed a good match. But when Shirahoshi grows up, this Roha is estimated to be 30 years old. It seems. The age gap is not too big. Seeing Neptune nodding for a while, shaking his head for a while, his face turned bright and dark, Roha couldn't help showing a weird expression on his face. What is this guy thinking about? Cough. King Neptune, the banquet is almost over, I think we should talk about business. Roha took a sip of wine and said lightly. I agree, cried Neptune, slamming the armrest. People in the hall. Roha, what do you agree with? I haven't even started talking yet. What the hell are you thinking, man? Looking at the people around him staring blankly at him, Neptune blushed, laughed twice, and waved his hand. It's okay, everyone keep eating and drinking, don't worry about me, don't worry about me. Then, Neptune rubbed his hands and looked at Roha with a smirk. Well, what did you want to say just now? Roha shook his head helplessly. Tiger should have told you before I came. Said it. Neptune blinked, then suddenly reacted and patted his thigh fiercely. Oh, yes, I remembered. Tiger said you want to make a deal with us. Speaking of which, Neptune couldn't help but look at Roha with a look of anxiety and anticipation. The expectation is because the Dimension Brigade actually wants to make a deal with him, so Fishman Island is likely to hug the thigh of the Dimension Brigade. The anxiety is because he is afraid that he will not be able to meet the requirements of the Dimensional Brigade. Thinking about it, Neptune's thoughts couldn't help drifting away. If Roha makes a request, he wants to marry Shirahoshi. Did he promise? Or promise? Chapter 242 Win-Win. Seeing that Neptune was about to start an inexplicable brain supplement again, Roha coughed twice, and after calling Neptune's attention, he slowly said his request. The first is a request. Roha wants to get a part of the murderous medicine ES. For this request, Neptune did not object, but after explaining the consequences of the murderous medicine S with Roha, after seeing Roha understand, he didn't say anything, he readily agreed, and promised to give it to Roha's satisfaction quantity. After writing about Neptune, Roha slowly made a second request. And this request has just been made, and Neptune can't help but widen his eyes and his face is serious. I want to see Joey Boy's confessions, and I want to read all the Murloc records about that blank 100 years. Although Roha's tone was soft and slow, the words he said slammed into Neptune's heart like a 10,000-ton hammer. The Dimension Brigade actually knew about the existence of Joey Boy. Neptune's eyes were filled with uncontrollable horror. The existence of Joey Boy is a major secret passed down from generation to generation by the Murloc royal family, and the Confession Book, located in Sea Forest, is a secret that Murloc Island has guarded for many years. How did Roha know about this? Did he want to know about Joey Boy, or did the Dimension Brigade want to know? Where did they get the news from? The traitor once flashed in Neptune's mind, and then a bigger question popped into his mind. Now that Roha already knows the existence of Joey Boy and Confession Book, does it mean that he also knows the identity of Shirahoshi? The name Mermaid Princess is actually one of the 3 ancient weapons, the identity of the inheritor of Sea King. Thinking of this possibility, Neptune couldn't help clenching his fists and looked at Roha seriously. If Bai Xing's identity is revealed, I am afraid that even Whitebeard can't protect Fishman Island. Aware of Neptune's sudden vigilance, Roha smiled faintly. I know what you're thinking. Yes, I know that Princess White Star is actually the successor of Sea King, Poseidon, and I also know that Joey Boy once had an agreement with the previous mermaid princess who inherited Poseidon's power. However, you think too much. Rojas suddenly raised his hand with a smile and wanted to pat Neptune's shoulder, but after realizing the huge gap in height between the two, he patted Neptune's little boy embarrassedly. Arm. Thinking too much. Neptune was stunned for a moment, and then he understood something. Roja nodded lightly with a smile, shook the wine glass in his hand, and the fragrant red wine swayed, reflecting his domineering eyes. If our dimensional brigade is really that kind of robber-like group, or if we are plotting against Fishman Island, do you think I will still drink with you here? Roja looked at Neptune. Lightning flashed in Neptune's mind, and he immediately understood. At the same time, a layer of cold sweat suddenly rose on his back, and all the hair on his body stood up. Indeed, if the Dimension Brigade has the idea of conspiracy, why negotiate a deal with him, and send one or two strong men directly to suppress it with absolute force? At that time, even if the people of the Dimension Brigade slaughtered the Murloc royal family, I am afraid that no one will trouble them. Even if he is as strong as Whitebeard, if he wants to fight with the Dimensional Brigade, he will have to weigh whether he can defeat the Dimensional Brigade. After the victory, how many of his sons will survive? It was Neptune who thought too much, and we agreed to this request. Suddenly a brisk female voice came from behind Neptune. Then Princess Otoji, who was wearing a gorgeous long dress, slowly walked out from behind Neptune. Her eyes were clear, and she looked straight at Roja, with trust in her eyes. Yiji. Neptune looked hesitantly at Princess Otoji. After seeing Princess Otoji smiling and nodding, he finally got rid of the previous tension and relaxed. Otoji uses all the arrogance, and can perceive other people's minds, so as long as she uses her abilities, she can roughly know the other person's heart at a glance. Although a strong man like Roja has a strong spiritual and subconscious self-protection ability, Princess Otahime can still roughly feel the truth of Roja's words. From Roja's heart, she felt absolute sincerity and kindness. Therefore, she chose to believe in Roja. It's me being abrupt, I'll send someone to take you to the sea forest in a while. Neptune scratched his head and said a little embarrassedly. I haven't finished speaking yet. Roja shook his head. In addition to the first two items, I also hope to get Princess White Star's blood, just a little bit. White Star's blood. Neptune and Princess Otoji glanced at each other instinctively, and saw the same doubts in each other's eyes. The two turned their heads in unison and looked at Roja, hoping to get his explanation. Roja smiled lightly. I haven't been able to tell you the specific reasons, but I can only say that from the blood of Princess White Star, we can decipher some information. Information about the lost 100 years. Of course, I'm not arrogant enough to think that a life-saving grace can make Fishman Island pay for the secrets and precious daughter's blood that have been passed down from generation to generation. For this reason, I can promise that Fishman Island will receive the kindness of the Dimension Brigade from now on. Even if Fishman Island becomes an enemy of the world government one day, the Dimension Brigade will provide corresponding shelter. Hearing this, Princess Itoji and King Neptune couldn't help but laugh. Mr. is serious, and we agreed to your request. Princess Aji said with a smile. 0.5. Although the two people who doted on their daughter felt a little uncomfortable by letting their precious daughter take a needle for no reason, but if it was for the future of Fishman Island, they were still willing to pay this price. A transaction, both sides got a satisfactory result. Fishman Island got the coveted big backer, while Roja got the historical text and the blood of Sea King, Poseidon. As for whether sheltering Fishman Island will cause trouble for himself, Roja is not too worried. Fishman Island has never been a force that is keen to do things, they just want to live a little better. The most important thing is that with such a relationship, I believe that the magazines of Dream Magazine will soon be widely circulated in this kingdom that is under 10,000 meters under the sea. Chapter 243 Confession. A few hours later, after getting the murderous medicine Roja was led by the palace relatives in the Neptune Road to the sea forest located in the northeast of Fishman Street. Brother Roja, this is the forest of the sea, and we can't go in. Bai Xing, who sneaked up halfway, pointed to the forest of sea not far away, and said to Roha. At the end, Bai Xing, who fanned his long eyelashes, lowered his head, and stirred his hands together. Are you really going to leave after going to the sea forest? Of course, my princess. Looking at the cute appearance of Shiroya, Roha also smiled. His right hand slammed down his left chest, his upper body bent, and he made a slightly exaggerated knight's salute. PFF'd, don't make fun of me. Bai Xing burst out laughing, and the original sad expression on his face was brushed back. Wiping the tears left behind, Shirahoshi lowered his head and thought for a moment, then rushed up and hugged Roha. Then you must miss me. I'm leaving. After hugging 08, Bai Xing blushed suddenly and hurriedly swam into the distance. Definitely. Looking at the back of Shirahoshi's departure, Roha nodded solemnly. Although he had not been in contact with Shirahoshi for a long time, Roha still deeply fell in love with this cute and kind little girl. Of course, it's the kind of love between brothers and sisters, and Roha hasn't reached that kind of perverted lolicon. When Shirahoshi's back disappeared from sight, Roha turned his head and looked into the distance. Where the oath boat, Noah is, and Roha also knows that at this moment, under Noah, this group of disgusting worms lives. Although the killing intent was already born in his heart, Roha still shook his head and rushed towards the forest of the sea. Everything has a first come, finish the business at hand first, and then go to exterminate the insects. It didn't take long for Roha to find the location of the confession book. It is said to be a repentance book, but it is actually a huge stone tablet standing on the bottom of the sea, and on the stone tablet is engraved the same words as the historical text. Taking out a photo-taking phone bug, Roha took a photo of the historical text in front of him, and immediately sent it to Vegapunk, who had been waiting for a long time, through the special concerned system, and asked him to be translated by Skynet. That's right, Skynet now has the ability to decipher the text of history. Long before he came to the capital of Seven Waters, Roha had ordered the collection of written documents from various kingdoms around the world, as well as books recorded in various ancient scripts, as well as various archaeological books. In addition, Roha also offered a lot of money and invited a group of scholars to stay in the Seven Waters and do a certain amount of research for Roha. And what Roha paid was just the massive knowledge in Skynet and some money that was dispensable to him. Under the irresistible reward, in just 2 weeks, a huge amount of literature was sent to the Seven Waters, and hundreds of scholars were tempted by Skynet's powerful ability to stay in the Seven Waters. Water capital. It can be said that in just these 2 weeks, the knowledge stored by Skynet has surpassed that of the Tree of Omniscience, which was once known as the library with the largest collection of books in the world. And the number of scholars in the Seven Waters has surpassed Robin's hometown, O'Hara. After all, O'Hara once had the largest number of scholars and the largest library in the world, but that was only relative to the rest of the world. In the face of summoning from all over the world, O'Hara, the capital of Seven Waters, with deep pockets, generous treatment, free provision of a large amount of knowledge, and a research platform, gathered together with interest and self-discipline, is still not enough to see. No one is perfect, and scholars also need food, clothing, housing, and transportation. They can live in a mansion and eat gourmet food while doing research. Who wants to go to the backcountry and eat wowotu? Under such conditions, Skynet, which has capabilities comparable to the supercomputers of later generations, naturally acquired the ability to decipher the text of history. 10 minutes later, Roha received a letter from Vegapunk, and the contents of Joey Boy's confession finally appeared in front of him. My dear princess, although my heart is full of grief, I still want to tell you that our promise may not be completed. Open black lens bracket above this sea, unprecedented drastic changes have taken place. Close black lens bracket. Although the power of the changer is far beyond this era, but his enemies are too many, and he is too kind, maybe he will die soon. If I am still alive in this world after his death, then I will definitely come back to fulfill the promise with you and let the Murlocs have a better future. If I don't come back, my princess, please don't look for me. Even if your strength is extremely powerful, it is still slightly insufficient for the enemy at sea. I'm sorry, my princess, please forgive me for breaking my word. Open black lens bracket. I hereby repent. Close black lens bracket. Finally, please remember that the Dark Age will end sooner or later, and the person who inherits D.S. will be the great savior. Sinful and trustworthy, Joy Boy. After reading the translated text sent by Vegapunk, Roja stood silently on the spot. He could feel the sadness and remorse in Joy Boy's heart when he wrote the confession book. Maybe the relationship between Joey Boy and the Mermaid Princess is not the same as 517, but because of the accident he mentioned, the two are separated by yin and yang. In addition to being sympathetic to Joy Boy's mood, Roja also found problems in the text. First of all, the blank 100 years is because of a so-called changemaker, a changer who can make enemies of the world, and this changer is probably related to D. Secondly, according to the words in the confession book, the princess who agreed with Joy Boy is likely to have fully mastered the ability of Poseidon. So the question is, how dangerous is it, so that Poseidon, who has the ability to manipulate all the sea kings and even more powerful, dare not go to sea? What happened in the 100 years of disappearance? It's getting more and more interesting. Roja sighed and raised his head, but an excited smile appeared on his face. It's not a bad feeling to explore the unknown and decipher the puzzles that were not known before. Standing there and thinking for a while, Roja stepped forward and walked towards the distance. Now, he is extremely eager to see the historical texts in the Kingdom of Alabasta, and wants to get closer to the truth of the 100 years. And before him, he had to take care of the trifles. Chapter 244 Beheading and Returning. Not far from Fishman Island, there is a huge ship like a small island. Even the sea kings known as nightmares in the sea are just like dolls in front of it. Existence, one can imagine how huge this sunken ship is. This ship is also, 800 years ago, Joy Boy and the Mermaid Princess of that time shared the promise to move the inhabitants of Fishman Island to the ground. The boat of the oath, Noah. Beneath the huge Noah is a huge shadow. And in that shadow, you can see an old dilapidated ship, leaning against a dense thicket of large seaweed. In the middle of the deck, above the dilapidated mast, hangs a crossed skull flag, and in the bow, there is a skull with fangs. This is the pirate ship of the Flying Pirates, the Flying Dutchman. At this time, its captain, Vanderdecken Ix, was walking restlessly in the captain's room, biting his gloves and venting his irritability. Just a few hours ago, he witnessed the riot in the central square of Fishman Island, and even saw the abnormality of Princess White Star with his own eyes. Although Bai Xing did not fully awaken the ability of Poseidon, at that time, Vanderdecken Ix was still aware of the abnormality of the Neptunes around him, as well as the special power of Bai Xing. This scene made Vanderdecken Ix suddenly recall the words left by his ancestors about the ancient weapon, Poseidon. That girl, Princess White Star, must be the inheritor of one of the three ancient weapons, Poseidon. As long as you get her, you can get the power to rule the sea. But, he actually failed to seize the once-in-a-100-year opportunity. Damn bastard. Vanderdecken Ix bit his gloves frantically, his face grim. If it wasn't for that man, he might have succeeded now. The worst can leave the mark on the White Star. But it was because of the appearance of that man that he missed this opportunity. It was even said that after seeing the power of that man, Vanderdecken Ix did not dare to take a step forward and hurried back. But now, Princess Bai Xing has returned to Dragon Palace City. If he wants to get close to Bai Xing, it will be as difficult as going to the sky. No, I can't give up. I must get Poseidon, I must get it. Vanderdecken Ix put down the tattered glove that was bitten, and turned his hands behind his back, thinking about how to get the White Star. The man must not be here for long, and he will act when he is gone. But How to enter Dragon Palace City. There is only one way to enter Dragon Palace City. It's too difficult to get in. Or, kidnap the family of a minister and threaten him to open the door. Yes, that's it. Vanderdecken X slammed his fist into his palm with a look of excitement. Then who are you planning to kidnap? Just when Vanderdecken IX was complacent for his own idea, an indifferent voice suddenly came from behind him. I haven't thought about it yet. Vanderdecken X replied subconsciously, and the next moment, he froze all over, and a coolness rushed from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. How could there be other people in his room? And when he turned his head, his eyes widened and he was horrified. Because standing in front of him was Roja, who was wrapped in the swimming coating. Impossible. How did you get in? Outside. Outside. King Vanderdecken IX stepped back in horror. His eyes kept turning to the door. What about his crew? How can you let this guy in? Huh. Roja tilted his head with a smile on his face. Do you mean the crew members outside you? Don't worry, they slept very deeply and probably miss you very much now. Although Roja's smile is still warm and sunny, but in the heart of Vanderdecken X, Roja at this time is simply a devil exuding a monstrous devil. Cold sweat stained the placket of Vanderdecken X. Given your dangerous self-talk just now, you should know what's going to happen next, right? Roja walked towards Vanderdecken X step by step. Do ent. I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. Can't I just get out of here? I don't dare to play Bakesing's idea anymore, really. Vanderdecken X screamed and stepped back, begging for mercy, but in the next second, the icy blade had appeared in front of him. It's just ordinary, with a slash that breaks through the sky and screams. The next moment, on the Flying Dutchman, a cut mark of the certificate suddenly appeared. With a roar, the dilapidated pirate ship finally came to the end of its life. I'm sorry, but I don't believe your nonsense at all. Roja, who had already teleported out, looked at the pirate ship that was divided into two halves under his feet, and murmured. Then, his figure disappeared again. The Fishman Island matter has also been resolved, it is time to go home. A few minutes later, Roja appeared in the Research Institute of the Seven Waters. Lord Roja, welcome back. A beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed girl in a maid outfit was waiting at the entrance of the institute, opening the door for Roja. Your name? Roja asked lightly. SS00123, the human name is Leanne. The girl replied with a smile, her eyebrows full of coquettishness, but if you look closely at her expression, you can still see the slightest sense of weirdness. Because she smiled so perfectly. Whether it's the curvature of the corners of her mouth, the curvature of her eyes, or her cute dimples, they all seem to be measured, and every time she smiles, it's the exact same smile. SS. Body Strengthening System. His eyes stopped on the girl's slightly slender waist. Roja nodded lightly, and immediately said, I will rule Tianjin Yashang for a while, and let him revise it again. Expression parameters. Understood, it has been listed as the first priority. The girl nodded quickly, and the golden ponytail danced with it. By the way, where are all the doctors? Dr. Yashang Tianjing and Dr. Gage are on the third floor, Dr. Bergapunk is in the rest area on the 7th floor, eating. Huh. Roja suddenly stopped and turned to look at the girl, his eyes narrowed. Where's Aeolia? Chapter 245 Lelouch, Battle of Tokyo. Without any hesitation, the android girl immediately replied, Dr. Eoria is on his way to the Kingdom of Alabasta and is expected to arrive in 3 days. Hearing this, Roja couldn't help frowning. Why did he go to the Kingdom of Alabasta? Tell me from the beginning to the end. The android setting is still not perfect, and asking a question makes Roja speechless. Next, in the narration of the android girl, Roja finally understood the whole story. It turned out that the team that went to the tomb of the King of Alabasta and printed the historical text had already returned, and through the Skynet translation, they knew the current location of Hades and the usage of Hades recorded in the historical texts. After reading the translated content, Aeolia set off in person, escorted by a group of Shadow members, to the kingdom of Alabasta 517, and decided to excavate Hades. Although I was curious why Eoria suddenly became so interested in Hades, Roha didn't plan to care about him, but let Shadow send some more people to Eoria through Skynet. And Shirahoshi,'s blood to them. Roha didn't stay in the research institute too much, and went home. Lady Estes, in the West Sea, has united two kingdoms and is waging war against another kingdom ruled by a tyrant. 76.3% of the animal's genes have been cracked, and it is expected to be completely cracked within 2 months, and within a year, animal-type devil fruit powers can be mass-produced. Miss Monet went to sea 3 days ago. Yesterday, she defeated the Red Shark pirates with a maximum bounty of 120 million. She is on her way back. The android Rem has completed the 7th trimming, swallowed the fruit of childishness yesterday, was escorted by Tien Cho Tianzi Kim Bradley, and went to the West Sea to help Ms. Estes to complete the match control of the kingdom. Skynet users have reached 5.23 million, resident users have reached 720,000, a year-on-year increase. Historical documents, scholars, expenditure. Roha walked towards the house while looking at the classified information in Skynet. After he almost browsed the recent information, Roha finally came to the door. Gently opening the door, Roha saw Sugar, who was sitting on the sofa, holding a dream magazine. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Sugar raised her head. When she saw Roha, a look of surprise appeared on her face, but she soon shook her head and snorted, and she stopped moving. What's going on here? Awkward. Roha raised his eyebrows, walked over immediately, and sat next to Sugar. Move, move, move. Looking at the Sugar who was sitting on the other side of the sofa, Roha couldn't help hooking the corner of his mouth, and moved closer to the Sugar. Sugar, what's wrong? Roha asked with a light smile, subconsciously glanced at the magazine in Tang's hands. Well, it's the rebellious Lelouch. In the picture, in an ancient ruin, Lelouch and Shumu Suzaku, who were wearing zero uniforms but not wearing masks, were holding pistols with blood on their faces, pointing at each other, and their faces were hideous. Since this scene has appeared, it means that the serialization of this issue is the last episode of the first season of the rebellious Lelouch. Seeing this, Roha almost understood that the Sugar was unhappy. You are because of this comic. Roha pointed to the comic on Sugar's knee. Yeah, Sugar pouted and nodded sullenly. Well, Roha couldn't help covering his forehead, a little speechless. How can he tell Shatang that Lelouch is not dead, and Shumu Suzaku is not dead, and will appear in the next season soon? That doesn't work either. The plot of the second season is much worse than the first season. Don't you have to cry when you see the Sugar? After thinking about it, Roha reached out and rubbed Sugar's hair. It's just a comic, what's not to be unhappy about? Don't worry, no one died, I'll show you the next few issues later, okay? Hearing this, Shatang turned his head instantly, blinked his shining eyes, and looked at Roha in surprise. Really? Well, really. Roha nodded with a smile, and silently added in his heart, show you the Great Harmony edition. I knew Brother Roha was the best. Sugar cheered and jumped into Roha's arms. Patting Sugar's back, feeling the pure joy of Sugar, Roha couldn't help but smile. It's just that although Roha coaxed the Sugar, tens of thousands of readers in this world were very angry with the comics in this issue. Doflamingo is one of the most typical of them. Chapter 246 Ming Brother Who Was Blown Up by Comics. New World, Whitebeard Chassis, a Kingdom. In a manor in a deep forest in the kingdom, Doflamingo, who was half lying on the sun lounger, lightly took out the magazine from the servant's hand, nodded slightly, and signaled the servant to go out. When the door slammed, Doflamingo sat up and unpacked the magazine excitedly and placed it on his lap, looking impatient. It's time to succeed, it's time to unify District 11. Doflamingo muttered to himself excitedly. Doflamingo has been completely obsessed with this comic since watching the first issue of Rebel Lelouch. The rebellious Lelouch has been serialized so far, and he will buy and watch every issue as soon as possible. Not only that, all the rebellious Lelouch's books, extras, and peripheral goods are also placed in Doflamingo's bedroom. Even in the closet of his bedroom, there are several specially customized clothes, from the student uniform of Ashford Academy where Lelouch is located, to the equestrian uniform, to the uniform of Zero, he has all one. Although Zero's discreet uniform was a bit weird and he never wore it, it didn't prevent Doflamingo from looking happy. The cover of this issue. What's going on? Just after unpacking, Doflamingo saw the cover of this issue, which is also the scene where Lelouch and Shumu Suzaku pointed at each other with guns. Seeing the blood on Lelouch's face, Doflamingo frowned. What are you doing in this issue? You actually end up in person, pointing at that idiot Beep. With a gun. Brother Doflamingo couldn't help scolding. As early as in the last issue, the rebel army led by Lelouch had already started an offensive and defensive battle with the army of the Holy Britannia Kingdom stationed in Tokyo. It is also known as the First Tokyo Showdown, in the plot. Before the battle, Lelouch used Gios to control the staff who could manipulate Tokyo's special building blocks. After the battle started, the set Gios was launched. Under the control of the staff, all the special events sections created for earthquake prevention in the outer Tokyo area were disintegrated in an instant, and the Holy Britannia army standing on the outer section slipped fall, and the loss is heavy. And the rebel army led by Lelouch took the opportunity to drive straight in and captured most of Tokyo in one fell swoop. Then, in the battle with the second Princess Cornelia, that is, Lelouch's sister, Lelouch still controlled Cornelia's personal guards through the Gios set in advance, and defeated Cornelia in one fell swoop. In such a situation of overall victory, Doflamingo really didn't understand, why did Lelouch condescend to fight against the stupid ex-Shumu Suzaku, and he still had blood on his face. What a joke. That's right, in Doflamingo's eyes, Shumu Suzaku is an out-and-out idiot Beep. The kind that is useless except for his powerful force. Especially Shumu Suzaku's Madonna-like character. Every time he saw him, Doflamingo couldn't help feeling sick. For him, the Virgin or something is simply garbage. Big rubbish. Do you want to achieve anything with just one brain muscle? What a joke. It can be said that as long as Shumu Suzaku does not join Lelouch for a day, Brother Doflamingo will always hate him. Doflamingo has brought himself into Lelouch. When I opened the cover, the first thing I saw was Cornelia, who was slumped on the ground, and Lelouch in a victorious attitude. Seeing this, Doflamingo smiled with satisfaction. The winner should have the attitude of the winner, and the loser should kneel and surrender. But it's better to finish the question early, kill it, and don't need Gios to manipulate it. Brother Doflamingo murmured to himself while looking at the cartoon. Brother Doflamingo was not interested at all about Lelouch's questioning and the cause of Lelouch's mother's death. He just wanted to see Lelouch unify the world. Because of this, Brother Doflamingo was a little impatient. Let Lelouch finish Cornelia's affairs as soon as possible. After the influence of many comics of Coates, Doflamingo also understood a truth. That is, villains often die of talking too much. After defeating the enemy, be sure to go up and cut him immediately. If it really doesn't work, just chop off the limbs or cut off the tendons of the arms and legs. No matter what, you must quickly destroy the opponent's fighting ability. If Momoha enjoys the joy of victory there, it is likely to be overturned by the enemy. Ellipsis ellipsis. 9 flowers. Seeing that Lelouch was asking Cornelia a question, Cece, who was sitting in the mecha, suddenly said something. Hey, come back soon. Your sister has been kidnapped. Close black lens bracket. Seeing this, Doflamingo's heart thumped, and a bad premonition rose in his heart. I hurriedly read a few pages, and when I saw that Lelouch had been kidnapped because of his sister Nonali, and abandoned the easy victory and the Black Knights that he had worked so hard to manage, Doflamingo's eyes immediately turned red. What the hell? Did you slip away? Brother, the final battle. It's all over. Would you wait a few minutes before walking? Isn't it a kidnapping? No matter how anxious you are, You can wait until the kidnappers call you to discuss the conditions, right? Now that you are so swaggering about driving a top-level mecha, are you not afraid of people tearing up the ticket? And take 10,000 steps back and say, without you, wouldn't the rhythm of that group of rebels like trash be wiped out in minutes? Sure enough, as expected by Doflamingo, after Lelouch stopped commanding and transferred the command to others, the command system of the rebel army was instantly paralyzed, and countless soldiers were easily defeated by the enemy in a daze. Seeing the death of one supporting role after another, the explosion of battle armor, and the insurgent army being beaten back at a faster rate, Doflamingo only felt that his heart was bleeding. I'm going to fuck you, what the hell? Doflamingo couldn't bear the feeling of being force-fed any longer. He stood up suddenly, threw the magazine in his hand to the ground, panting heavily. What the hell is this last episode? What about dragging the plot? Also let people not look cool. At this time, Doflamingo wanted to kill the capital of the Seven Waters immediately, pull out Gauchi, and beat him hard. Players don't play like this. It looked good from the front and was full of passion. When it came out like this, it was really hard to explode. Standing still for a while, Doflamingo picked up the magazine on the ground, patted the dust on it, and planned to take a look. What if the result was what he expected? Chapter 247 Dark Fruit appears. Clap. Slap. In the luxurious rooms, there are broken precious decorations everywhere, and at a glance, the decorations worth millions of bells are destroyed. Silly beep. Author. What the hell is this drawing? Ah. Doflamingo roared in anger, and at his feet was the torn Dream magazine, but even so, he couldn't quell the anger in his heart. He obviously looked forward to it for so long, but what the hell is this issue of the magazine drawing? Just because of a sister. Abandoned a great career at your fingertips. What a joke. Although I already knew Lelouch's character and Nonali's position in Lelouch's heart, for someone like Doflamingo who can sacrifice everything for the great cause, this kind of plot is simply poisonous. Especially when he was so immersive before, and suddenly coming like this, it was like poisoning him to death. MD, I will never read this disgusting manga again. Brother Doflamingo angrily crushed the magazine on the ground, his anger still lingering. Boom, boom, boom. Just when Doflamingo was looking annoyed, the door of the room was suddenly knocked. Come in. With the sound of the door opening, Diamante walked in slowly. Glancing at the tragic state of the room, Diamante raised his eyebrows and immediately came to Doflamingo. Young master, according to the informant, some members of CP0 were seen at the border of the kingdom. So soon, Brother Doflamingo frowned, looking unhappy. Originally, he was ready to resist the pursuit of the world government after he took the explosive rock. But Doflamingo never expected that the reaction of the world government would be so big. It was like robbing their wife, and he wanted to send everyone out to find him. Various forces appeared one after another, and the espionage agency followed like a hound, forcing Doflamingo to keep shifting positions. After finally escaping to Whitebeard's chassis and lurking, the people from CP0 dare to follow. Is he really being bullied? How many people with white beards are there near the kingdom? Doflamingo asked with a gloomy expression. The captain of the first team, Marco, the Phoenix, as well as some members of the second team and a large number of peripheral personnel. Diamante replied respectfully. Marco. Doflamingo's eyebrows jumped, a little surprised. He's not staying on the Moby Dick, how did he come here? No wonder Doflamingo was surprised. As a member of the Whitebeard Pirates, Marco, whose status is second only to Whitebeard, has always been regarded as a co-captain. There is no important thing, and he will not leave at will. On the Moby Dick. Could it be that something happened to the Whitebeard Pirates? Diamante thought for a moment and then said, I don't know the specific reason for now, but according to the information, they seem to be looking for something. Okay, I see. Brother Doflamingo nodded and grinned. Send someone to lead the people from CP0 to Marco. I don't believe that people with Whitebeard can allow those bugs from CP0 to appear on its own turf. Understood. Diamante nodded and turned to leave. Ah, yes. Doflamingo suddenly stopped Diamante. You'll buy me another copy later, the latest issue of Fantasy magazine. Okay. Diamante glanced at the torn magazine under Doflamingo's feet, and walked out of the room with a hooked mouth. Tisk, broken comics. Brother Doflamingo kicked the fragments of the magazine under his feet, pouted, with a helpless expression on his face. It's not that he doesn't talk about it, but this comic is really good. And with the habit of Dream magazine in the past, since there are no other comics serialized in this issue, the rebellious Lelouch is definitely not over yet. Next, what will Lelouch do? Doflamingo expressed great curiosity and looked forward to the next issue of the magazine. 3 days later, in a huge virgin jungle, silhouettes exuding a powerful momentum shuttled and jumped in the jungle. Where many figures passed, the beasts all fell down and fled, and from time to time there were a few beasts who wanted to try to slaughter the flying figures. However, before the beast can be saved from the lurking, it is found in advance and beheaded mercilessly. In the past few days, the beasts of this primeval forest have also known that a group of powerful humans have come here. Especially the leader of the group of humans, the guy who can turn into a blue flame giant bird, is simply terrifying. Well, when will this be found? Beside a small lake, several pirates were sitting around and eating lunch. One pirate complained after swallowing a piece of barbecued meat. That's right, the new world is so big, where can I find it? We've been searching for so long, and we haven't even searched for our own chassis. If we can't find it after we've searched, why don't we go to the redhead and the ant to search? I think it's possible that the captains are all interested in this fruit. Look at Captain Marco, he hasn't had a good rest for a long time, and he feels that he has lost a lot of weight. You said that the Dimensional Brigade was fooling us, just to see our jokes. Come on, just them. Give them a few courage, and they don't dare. Don't say a few words. Seeing that his companions were talking more and more outrageous, the team leader who had been sitting in the first place to eat silently finally couldn't stand it any longer and scolded them. Looking at the disgruntled subordinates, the team leader sighed and said, "You don't have to think about whether you have any, just look for it, and I heard that this time, Captain Marco received information, and some hunters said they were in. I have seen something that looks like a dark fruit in this forest, otherwise Captain Marco would not have dispatched himself. Also, take all your thoughts, the Dimension Brigade 1.0 doesn't need to lie to us, and after finding the secret fruit, you can also have a good relationship with others, and when their changer technology is successfully developed, everyone will be beneficiaries, Dad. He also has a few more years to live." Quote. You're complaining here, dawdling, have you forgotten how Daddy treated you? Hearing this, the surrounding pirates could not help but fell silent. Even if they have 1,000 reasons, they can't say it at this time, because Whitebeard really treats them the way he treats his sons, just like his family. It is precisely because of this that the members of the Whitebeard pirates affectionately call Whitebeard, Dad. Just when everyone was silent, the miniature phone bug on the captain's shoulder suddenly rang, followed by a maddened voice. I found it. I found the dark fruit. Chapter 248 Extinct. You don't have to look anymore. I found the dark fruit. Ha ha ha, I found it. Among the intercom bugs, Marco's ecstatic words came, and even everyone was happy. After staying in this virgin forest for so long, I finally found it. It's time to go home. There were bursts of cheers from time to time throughout the vast forest. After everyone's excitement subsided a little, a voice came from the walkie-talkie. Captain Marco, where are you? Do we need to pick you up? No, everyone should go back to the camp now, I'll just go back by myself. Good. Ha ha ha, Captain Marco, we are waiting for you in the camp. Finally I can live a normal life. It's such a broken forest, I've had enough. That's it. Marco, who was sitting on a rock, looked at the chattering phone bug on his shoulder, smiled and shook his head. These guys are really suffocated. Tightening the dark fruit into his pocket, Marco jumped off the rock and started galloping towards the camp. Thinking that the transaction with the 08-dimensional brigade is about to be completed, as long as the technology of the changer is successful, the Whitebeard can live a long life, and Marco inevitably has a smile on his face. As for the dimensional brigade bluffing them, Marco didn't even think about it. Because they are the Whitebeard pirates, no matter how strong the dimensional brigade is, if they dare to deceive them, they will face the anger of all the members of the Whitebeard pirates. Even if they can't defeat the dimensional brigade in a frontal battle, can they still be members of the ambush point outside the dimensional brigade? After a slight laugh, Marco jumped up a hill in front of him. Looking around, there was a sea of trees. After taking a rough look at the position, Marco gave a wry smile, and immediately started running again. The place he searched was too deep, and it was estimated that it would take several hours to return to the camp outside the forest. When I go back this time, I must call the rest of the people back and hold a grand banquet. At least it will be held for a few days and nights. By the way, after being in the woods for so long, there should be several more issues of Dream magazine. When I go back, I must make up for it. The latest comic is quite interesting. I don't know how Dad is doing recently. The journey in the jungle is always very boring, and Marco can't help but get distracted. After nearly 2 hours of walking, Marco finally approached the camp. Walking out of the forest, Marco saw the smoke rising from the camp and a faint aroma of meat at a glance. These greedy bastards didn't even wait for me to start eating. Marco scolded and quickened his pace. The closer he got to the camp, the worse Marco's mood became. When he was still 200 meters away from zero, the depression in his heart even made him breathless. Marco couldn't help but stop and looked at the direction of the camp with a solemn expression. Only then did he realize the problem. Too quiet. The camp is so quiet. Since he saw the camp, not only has he not heard any noise, but he has not seen anyone walking around. As a companion who gets along day and night, Marco of course knows the temperament of his group of companions. Even if they are sleeping, they can make a loud snoring sound, a rare relaxation time, and there is no reason to be so quiet. Unless they are all dead. This thought appeared in Malkad's mind like lightning, and then it lingered like a gangrene, deeply rooted in Marco's mind. The scene of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood appeared in his mind, and Marco couldn't help shivering. His face became anxious, and it instantly turned into the ability to activate the fruit, into a big blue flame bird, and rose into the sky. No, it's impossible. There are so many of them, absolutely impossible. Jolly, Stoka, and Barian are all here, plus the people from the second team. Even if they meet Kibukai, they can last for a while. Also, they still have communication phone bugs. They will definitely talk when something goes wrong. There's no reason not to tell me. Absolutely. It can't happen. They must be kidding me. These bastards, for making such a big joke, let me catch them, and I must teach them a lesson. Marco, who was flying in the sky, his eyes gradually turned a touch of red, his lips moved, his expression was excited, and he kept mumbling to himself. A mere 200-meter distance was only a momentary event for Marco, who was transformed into a phoenix. But when he saw the scene in the camp, it was inevitable that he showed a collapsed expression. Corpse. Looking around, there are corpses everywhere. There were corpses lying on the ground everywhere, and the entire camp was lying in disorder. The tents, the crates, the grass, wherever Marco could see, were full of motionless companions. Destroyed wreckage is everywhere, the ground is rolled, blood-stained weapons are thrown everywhere, a scene after the war. Looking at the once kind companions, now they have all fallen to the ground, motionless. Tears flowed from Marco's eyes instantly, and 2 tears appeared on his face. No, impossible. Marco shook his head frantically, released his transformation, and landed on the edge of the camp. The strong smell of blood lingered on the tip of his nose. Resisting the feeling of nausea in his heart, Marco walked forward tremblingly, came to the side of his closest companion, and squatted down. 940. Hey, Wake up! Wake up! Shaking his companion who was sitting on the ground, and looking at his lowered head, Marco's hands kept shaking. But at this time, Marco suddenly realized that the other party's chest was still rising and falling. Marco's expression lifted, and he quickly raised the other's head, stretched out his hand and put it under the other's nose. And breathing. Still alive. Marco breathed a sigh of relief, his expression lifted, and his eyes couldn't help looking inside the camp. Could it be that the situation was not as bad as he thought? An excited Marco rushed into the camp with a sense of anticipation for the rest of his life, checking the status of one companion after another. After this check, Marco's mood suddenly improved. Sure enough, as he expected, the companions did not die, they just fainted for some reason, and the bloody smell was caused by the blood of some companions who had been chopped off for some unknown reason. What the hell is going on? Marco looked at the group of colleagues who fell to the ground around him. His mind was a little dazed and he couldn't understand the situation. But at this moment, next to the campfire, there was a sudden groan. Marco was stunned for a moment, then looked up quickly and saw a slightly bloated man, covering his head and slowly sitting up. Chapter 249 Careless Marco. Although there was a faint sense of weirdness in his heart, Marco, who was eager to seek the truth of the matter, didn't think about it. He ran over and helped his awakened companion. Glancing at the other party's appearance, Marco quickly asked, "Titch, what the hell is going on?" "Well, Captain Marco." Blackbeard Titch covered his head and sat up, shook his head, and remained silent. "What's the matter? You talk." Marco was eager, and couldn't help but get closer to Blackbeard. "What the hell is going on here? Everyone is down." Suddenly, a sense of powerlessness flooded his body, and Marco fell to the ground with a confused look on his face. "What's going on?" Marco tried to stand up, but before he could stand up, a sudden force came from his side and kicked him to the ground. "Gia ha 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 ha, Captain Marco, you are still so naive, Gia ha 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 ha." A burst of wild laughter came from beside him. Marco's pupils shrank, he turned his head in disbelief, and happened to see that Blackbeard stood up from the ground with a grin on his face. How could he still look weak just now? "Titch, you." Mark's face showed horror, and he struggled to get up, but he was still weak, and there was a clattering sound from his feet. His heart tightened, and Marco lowered his head hastily. At this time, he realized that, at some point, a pair of shackles appeared on his feet. Halu stone shackles. Gia ha ha ha, I didn't expect it to be really successful. Blackbeard looked at Marco's horrified look, a burst of victorious joy, and he couldn't help laughing wildly. "Originally, my side has just fascinated them, and the preparations have not been completed. I didn't expect Captain Marco, you will come back. I was startled at the time, I thought it was going to fall short, but I didn't expect Captain Marco to be so careless, Gia ha ha ha." Marco, who was slumped on the ground, had given up struggling and looked at Blackbeard in disbelief. "You did it all. Why? Why, of course it's because of this." Blackbeard stretched out his hand and pulled Marco's pocket down. When he saw the dark fruit in his pocket, he laughed even more. "It's for this. Otherwise, why do you think I've been a soldier for so long in the Whitebeard Pirates? Ah." Speaking of which, Blackbeard kicked Marco fiercely, with uncontrollable excitement on his face. "It's because the chances of getting this fruit on Whitebeard's ship are higher. In order to get the most ferocious power in this devil fruit, to get this fruit that is different even among the natural fruits, do you know how much I paid?" Ah. The more Blackbeard spoke, the more excited he became, and he kicked Marco to the ground and rolled until he hit a fellow who fell to the ground. Noticing Marco's gaze towards his companions around him, Blackbeard Gia laughed. "Captain Marco, don't think that they can get up and save you. I added $1 million drug to their food and water. These guys, as soon as they came back and saw the wine and meat I had prepared, they wrote 1 or 2 and ate it like a starving ghost, and ate all the drugs. They can't get up. You guy, are you right to take care of Dad all the time?" Marco leaned reluctantly on his companion, looked at Blackbeard with disgust, and kept thinking about countermeasures in his mind. Oh, Dad is really good to me, but that's all. For me, as long as I can gain strength, everything can be abandoned. Captain Marco, you don't have to delay, I'll take you away after I've settled this issue. While speaking, Blackbeard picked up a long knife on the ground and walked towards the pirates on the ground. Marco was shocked when he saw Blackbeard's actions, and hurriedly shouted, "Tiki! What are you doing?" "Gia ha ha ha, of course it is to deal with these unsightly people. If they wake up, it will be a big trouble." Blackbeard Gia raised the knife in his hand with a smile. Seeing that Blackbeard was about to swing the knife, Marco's face became anxious, and his mind was spinning, and a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. "If you dare to kill them, I'll kill myself," Marco suddenly shouted loudly. "Huh." Blackbeard slowly put down the knife and turned to look at Marco. "What did you just say?" Seeing that his thoughts were not wrong, Marco breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Titch coldly. "You just said you wanted to take me away because you kept my life useful, right? Although I don't know if you are going to threaten my father with me or do something else, as long as you dare to kill anyone, I will suicide now." "Captain Marco, are you imagining yourself too important?" Blackbeard stared into Marco's eyes with an indifferent expression. "What do you think?" Marco was not afraid, only Blackbeard confronted him. The two sides stared at each other for a while. Finally, Blackbeard was defeated. Spreading his hands, Blackbeard looked helpless. "Okay, if you win, you deserve to be Captain Marco. You can see my flaws in such a short time." Glancing at the pirates lying around on the ground, a look of pity appeared in Blackbeard's eyes. It's a pity that such a large group of members of the Whitebeard pirates could not be killed. Although most of them are peripheral members, and there are not many main players, they are always his enemies in the future. It is really uncomfortable for Blackbeard to be unable to kill them. With a cold snort, Blackbeard picked up Marco, carried it on his shoulders, took a few more days of dry food, and ran to the right of the virgin jungle. There is a big river over there, and in a hidden place there is a wooden boat that he has just built these days. As long as he rides down the river in a wooden boat, within 2 days, he can enter the sea. At that time, the sea will be wide and the sky will be leapt by fish, and the sky will be high and the ground will be far away from birds. No matter how powerful the Whitebeard pirates are, it is not something that can be done in a short time to catch him. When he is familiar with the ability of Dark Fruit, as long as Whitebeard is not there, he will be sure to defeat the rest of the captains. And most importantly, he's not alone. Glancing at Marco, who was knocked unconscious by his own shoulder, Blackbeard gave a grin. Marco was his biggest bargaining chip. Chapter 250 Shichibukai, Blackbeard. The capital of Seven Waters, Roha's home. Blackbeard got the dark fruit, and Marco got caught by him. Roha looked at Genzo standing in front of him with a look of surprise, with a ridiculous look on his face. Originally, he told Whitebeard about the dark fruit to prevent Blackbeard from making trouble, but he did not expect that he would succeed in the end. And the one who was arrested was the captain of the first team, Marco. What are you kidding? What's up with Marco? Do all the players around him eat dry food? Thinking of the end, Roha couldn't help but help his forehead and sighed. It's not fun now. With Blackbeard's ability, since he has caught Marco, he will definitely use Marco to make a fuss. On Whitebeard's side, it's even more impossible to let Blackbeard do anything wrong. At that time, I'm afraid the whole new world, and even the whole world, will be in chaos. And this is the last thing Roha wants to see. People only seek spiritual entertainment when they live in peaceful times and live a stable life. If the world is in chaos, who will read his cartoons? Every time a person dies, a potential reader dies. That is a living fan value. No, Blackbeard has to be caught. This guy is really good at doing things. Roha patted the table and planned to give an order. But at this moment, a sudden alarm sounded suddenly in Roha's mind. Roha was stunned for a moment, his brows wrinkled, and he quickly relaxed his mind and opened Skynet. The alarm sound in his mind is Skynet's internal warning. Only when very urgent and important information appears, Skynet will take the initiative to warn. When Roja saw the information in Skynet, his pupils shrank, and he scolded instantly. Fuck, Blackbeard is an idiot beep. This time things are really big. New World, Moby Dick. On the huge deck, hundreds of elites of the Whitebeard pirates and nearly 10 captains of various divisions gathered around Whitebeard, with serious expressions and solemn atmosphere. Under the interweaving of one after another low momentum, the air seems to be condensed, making people breathless. The Whitebeard sitting in the middle of the crowd leaned back on the back of the chair, his eyes were closed, and he didn't say a word, looking like he was sleeping. But the more silent Whitebeard is, the heavier the mood of the surrounding members of the Whitebeard pirates. They can feel the heavier and heavier momentum on Whitebeard's body, like the cloud before the eruption of the volcano. Who's going after Titch? Whitebeard asked in a low voice with his eyes closed. Captain Joes, Captain Coulier, and Captain Lacchio are searching with their respective squads, but they haven't found any trace of Titch. Is that so? Whitebeard let out a long sigh of relief, opened his eyes slightly tired, and glanced around. What are your thoughts? Kill. Vista, the captain of the 5th Division, gritted his teeth, full of murderous intent. Yes, the Whitebeard pirates will not tolerate traitors. Titch must die. Brahmank, the captain of the 6th Division, immediately agreed, showing him with a simple and honest smile, his expression unprecedentedly hideous. Captain is right, Titch must die. Dad treats him so well, he actually dares to be a traitor, he must not be spared. Daddy's order, let everyone be dispatched. I don't believe the whole group is dispatched, and that bastard Titch can't be found. The remarks of several captains immediately aroused the anger of many crew members. For a while, there was a lot of noise on the Moby Dick, and fierce killing intent came one after another. For pirates, a traitor is an existence that must be killed with one's own hands. If there is a traitor in any one pirate group, and the other party gets away with it, it will be a lifelong shame for the entire group. Amid the clamor, Whitebeard didn't speak, just sat there quietly, looking at his sons, with an indifferent expression. Many members also noticed the abnormality of Whitebeard, and after a brief commotion, they gradually became silent. He raised his head and looked at the tall and burly Whitebeard, waiting for his final decision. After a long time, Whitebeard turned to look at the corner of the deck, where stood a tall and straight man in a white dress. From beginning to end, he didn't speak, just turned his back to everyone and looked at the sea. Neither Whitebeard's inquiry nor the murderous noise of the crowd made him turn around. Sachi, what are your thoughts? Whitebeard asked the man in the corner from a distance. Hearing this, the atmosphere on the deck stopped for a while, and everyone turned their heads in unison to look at the corner of the deck. At this time, everyone wanted to come, this person who was the most embarrassed in this incident. The captain of the 4th Division, Sachi, the direct boss of Titch the Blackbeard, is also Titch's best friend. Hearing Whitebeard's question, Sachi's straight back froze for a moment, then he turned around slowly and lowered his head, unable to see his expression at this time. I have no opinion, but I hope that after catching up with Titch, he can be executed by me, personally. A little bit of crystal was left from Sachi's lowered face. At this time, even people who hated Titch would inevitably be silent and speechless. Everyone understands Sachi's tangled and painful mood at this time. Whitebeard was silent for a while, and finally nodded. Good. Thank you, Dad, Sachi said with a choked sobs, and then hurried off the deck and into the cabin. The atmosphere on the deck has been quiet for a while. Vista looked at the silent companions around him, moved his lips and finally began to speak. Dad, we should discuss our actions. Not good, Captain. Dad, something happened. Suddenly a shout came from above. Everyone looked up and saw the watchman who had been staying on the observation deck, pulling the zipline down, waving a magazine in his hand. Owl, be quiet. Say something slowly. Vista frowned and reprimanded his subordinate. I can't keep quiet. Something really happened this time. The lookout owl pushed the crowd away regardless, rushed in front of Whitebeard, and handed over the newspaper in his hand. "Dad, look, what the hell is going on here?" "What's the matter?" Panic. Whitebeard frowned, took the newspaper, and muttered in a low voice, but when he saw the cover of the newspaper, his pupils shrank, and all the words were held back. "The new Shichibukai appears, named Blackbeard Tiki. There is something at home these days. There is only one chapter today, sorry." Chapter 251 Countermeasures, Gilgamesh. The world government announced that it has officially appointed Blackbeard Marshal DM Tick as Shichibukai. Enjoy all the rights of Shichibukai. Message in Skynet. Roha frowned, his face instantly gloomy. Although he had such an expectation, he did not expect Blackbeard to be so fast. Although the Chiwahai decree has been promulgated for more than 2 years, until now, because of the appearance of Roha, the waves that have set off have made the title of Chiwahai a joke. Crocodile disappeared mysteriously, and the world government has not been able to find the murderer, let alone any trace of Crocodile. Tiger saved his life because of Roha, and the Sun Pirates did not encounter drastic changes, so Jinpei naturally refused the invitation of Kibukai. Doflamingo has been expelled from the world government for stealing the explosive rock, and he is in full pursuit. Estes, rebellion. That is to say, so far, the so-called Chiwahai of the world government has only 3 people left: Hawkeye, the Empress, and Mariah. Even if the new Blackbeard is added, there are only 4 people, which is extremely miserable. Of this, but the reason why Blackbeard became Shichibukai. As we all know, the world government chooses Chiwahai not only for powerful pirates, but also for fame. Blackbeard, who had just obtained the dark fruit and had been unknown until then, could not meet this requirement at all. Unless. When Roha saw the next information, his face could not help gloomy, his eyes were cold and biting. It has been confirmed that Blackbeard Tich handed Marco to the Navy in exchange for the title of Kibukai. Phoenix will be formally executed in Marin Vando 7 days later. Close black lens bracket. Crack. Agitated, Roha couldn't help breaking the armrest of the chair. Throwing the handrail aside, Roha slowly closed his eyes. This time, it's really a big deal. With the temper of the Whitebeard pirates, Marco will definitely be rescued, and the Warring States period, who has fought with Whitebeard all his life, will definitely set up a net to stop Whitebeard. A war no less than a war on the top is about to begin. And what should Roha do? It is to stay out of the way, watching the Whitebeard pirates and the Navy fight to the death. Still, the sudden accident made the thoughts in Roha's mind cluttered. Whether it is the mass death of the members of the Whitebeard pirates, or the death of naval personnel, it is not what he wants to see. What Roha wants to create is a real era of peace. The loss of any party will make the world unbalanced, wars will inevitably spread, and the people will not live. Just as Roha was thinking about his forehead, a flash of lightning suddenly flashed in his mind. When did Blackbeard catch Marco? Roha suddenly raised his head and asked. 3 to 4 days ago. Genzo responded immediately. That's it. Roha patted his thigh, his face full of excitement. Immediately, Roha quickly communicated with Skynet and opened the map of the New World. Skynet, mark the place where Marco was caught, and calculate the fastest time for Blackbeard to arrive at Marin Vando with Marco. Understood. Skynet's coquettish female voice sounded, and a few seconds later, a red line connected Marco's accident site and Marin Vando. At the same time, a row of text appeared directly above the map. The distance between the 2 places is 4,600 nautical miles, and it will take 10 days to calculate that there is no need for coding and the journey is smooth. Close black lens bracket. Sure enough. The gloom on Roha's face was swept away, and he couldn't help laughing. Blackbeard just doesn't have enough time. In other words, he hasn't arrived at Marin Vando yet, and he may have found a place to hide. The announcement of the Warring States period is simply a blindfold, in order to provide time for escorting Marco. Skynet, mark me the range of places where Blackbeard may be hiding, and the way forward. This time, the deduction was very long. After more than 10 minutes, several huge apertures and red roots appeared on the map. Looking at the total number of apertures covering thousands of square kilometers, Roja raised his eyebrows and stood up straight. Notify the Whitebeard pirates and tell them that Blackbeard is still in the New World. Be sure to block all junctions leading to the first half of the Great Route. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. 9 flowers. Inform Tianjin Yashang to prepare a few small mobile skynets immediately. I will use it. In addition, I am telling him to wake up all the androids with tracking and searching capabilities in the android army. Notify Accelerator and ask him to wait for me at the Research Institute. Send me to order all members of Shadow in the New World, except for major missions, to go to the mission area marked by Skynet, and be sure to find Blackbeard and Marco. A series of orders were issued from Roja's mouth, and the hurried tone made Genzo realize the importance of the matter, and nodded quickly. After confirming that Roja was not talking, Genzo didn't stop for a second, and immediately left the room. After walking out of the room, he leapt and disappeared from Roja's sight. After Genzo left, Roja stood in the same place and pondered for a long time, and finally took out a golden card from the storage space. Character card. Gilgamesh. System. Consume character cards. Summon Gilgamesh. Without any hesitation, Roja immediately ordered in his mind. The order is confirmed, the Gilgamesh character card is consumed, the summoning preparation is completed, and the summoning is about to begin. Close black lens bracket. After hearing the system's reply, Roja immediately threw the card to the center of the living room. The golden card was suspended in the air after flying out not far. The next moment, the card suddenly exploded, turning into countless gold dust, splattering and filling the surrounding space. A mysterious force appeared out of thin air, guiding the gold powder to fall to the ground, turning into a golden circle with a radius of 3 meters. Looking at the circle that was more than half larger than the circle that summoned Estes, Roja hooked the corner of his mouth. In the next second, a golden beam of light like a volcanic eruption suddenly spewed out of the magic circle, and the golden light filled every corner of the room. Immediately afterwards, a domineering and arrogant aura overflowed, and a man with blonde hair and red pupils in golden armor walked out of the circle step by step. Miscellaneous, are you my summoner? Hearing this, Roja couldn't help but raised his eyebrows. Miscellaneous. 252nd Fool Gilgamesh. System, is it too late for me to choose to turn Gilgamesh into a mother now? Roja frowned and looked at Gilgamesh with a contemptuous expression. Call him miscellaneous. Tired of living. Successful summoning, unable to be a motherfucker. If the host really wants to be a motherfucker version of Gilgamesh, you can choose to kill the current summoned creature, and then close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket, take another one. Close black lens bracket. You. Roja twitched the corners of his mouth. Although there was nothing wrong with the system's reply, why did he feel that this sentence was so cheap? Miscellaneous, this king is asking you something. Gilgamesh on the other side frowned when he saw that Roja didn't pay attention to him. But what made Gilgamesh feel strange was that even if he was ignored, he didn't feel the slightest bit of anger. You know, with his usual temper, if a mere mortal dares to ignore him, he is afraid that a few noble phantasms will be smashed down every minute, so that the other party will have a long memory. It's still called a miscellaneous repairman. Roja clenched his fists, thinking about how to correct Gilgamesh's stinky problems, at least to maintain due respect for himself. Soon, an idea appeared in Roja's mind. Gilgamesh, shut up, Roja shouted suddenly. Suddenly being reprimanded like this, Gilgamesh frowned, and when he stared at him, he was about to swear and kill Roja on the spot. But in the next moment, Gilgamesh's body stiffened in place, and there was a thick look of horror in his eyes. Speechless. He was speechless. I can't even open my mouth. The king's treasure didn't follow orders, it couldn't be unfolded at all, and it was impossible to lock Roja in front of him. And most importantly, he could even feel that the anger he had raised was quickly dissipating. This kind of bizarre change made Gilgamesh panic a little bit, and stood in the same place at a loss. Seeing Gilgamesh's funny look, Roha chuckled, sat on the chair leisurely, picked up the tea on the table, and took a slow sip. What? Can't open your mouth? Can't do it? Roha looked at Gilgamesh with a smile. Seeing Gilgamesh blinking constantly without saying a word, Roha patted his head awkwardly. Oh yes, forget, you can't speak. Well, you can talk, but be careful, don't scold me. Roha smiled lightly and snapped his fingers. The next moment, Gilgamesh only felt that the strange power that bound him was instantly dissipated. Alternative. And GTA. He opened his mouth, but found that he could not say words such as miscellaneous repairs and garbage at all. In the end, Gilgamesh could only look at Roha angrily. Who the hell are you? Well, that's a good question. Roha gently shook the teacup in his hand, with a mysterious smile on his face. If in the previous life, this is the proper posture of a god, who specially pretends to be a master and a deceiver. You can understand me as the spokesperson of God, Roha said quietly. God. Gilgamesh's face was full of the expression, you lied to a ghost. As the oldest king, it's not that he hasn't seen God, but even the king of the gods can't do what Roha is now. Don't think about it, your so-called king of the gods, in my eyes, is just like a native of a small planet. Roha hooked his mouth. The real god should be the only ruler who rules the multiverse, and that kind of compared with the degree of dominance, whether it is the god who killed Enkidu or the so-called king of the gods, he is only the light of a mere firefly, how can it compare with the blazing sun? Quote. I don't know when. Gilgamesh gradually calmed down, looking at Roha with a look of inquiry, but the idea of approval gradually rose in his heart. He is the most ancient king and the most honorable existence of time. If anyone can be more honorable than him, maybe only the gods and kings of the world that he once existed in. It has to be said that this is also equivalent to a kind of psychological escape. The other party just said a few words, so he couldn't speak. This blow was too big for Gilgamesh. It's as if life and death are completely between the other party's thoughts. So, you summoned me just to tell me this? Gilgamesh stared with a frown. Roha smiled and shook his head, without answering directly. Gilgamesh, don't you think your original world was too small? I've been obsessed with it all my life. Uruk, who is a mere city, is not too aggrieved for a king like you. You mean? Gilgamesh's pupils shrank, and a thought appeared in his mind. That's it. Roha nodded with a chuckle. Follow me, battle the multiverse, compete with the powerhouses of different planes, talk with thousands of kings, and finally, conquer them, step on them, and finally your epic will be sung and admired by millions. Quote. You. How do you feel? Multiverse. King of thousands. Although Gilgamesh still doesn't understand what the multiverse means, it doesn't prevent him from making associations in his mind. That must be an extremely grand scene. His epic will be born. In comparison, it seems acceptable to follow someone more noble than him. My king, I agree. Gilgamesh nodded arrogantly, but the corners of his mouth that couldn't help but twitch destroyed Gilgamesh's arrogant posture. A lively arrogant man. Thinking of this, Roha couldn't help but smile. I have to say that the ability of the system is really powerful, and it turned Gilgamesh's thoughts into the most favorable place for Roha. Otherwise, with the eloquence of Elon 1.6, how could Gilgamesh be convinced in just a few words? He is not some yellow-haired gunner. Okay, since you agreed, we should go. Roha put down the teacup, clapped his hands, and stood up. What? Gilgamesh asked slightly interested. Make you feel good. Roha touched his chin, made a joke, and finally shook his head and became serious. We are going to end a war that is about to happen, and the best way I can think of is to simply let the reason for the war disappear. Roha's eyes burst into cold light, and in the next second, Roha and Gilgamesh disappeared in place. Blackbeard must die. Chapter 253 Destroyer Troops. A few hours later, in the New World, Blackbeard robbed the virgin forest of dark fruit. At the place where the Whitebeard pirates once camped, a dozen people gathered here at this time. The two leading people were Gilgamesh and Accelerator, who Roha had specially called. The two with the same arrogant personality, do not look at each other, stand on each side, and do not touch each other. Around them, there were more than a dozen warriors in pitch-black armor that covered their entire bodies. Behind each of them, there was something like a box on their backs. What is striking is that these warriors covered in pitch-black armor are almost identical in size to each other. If you look closely, you can even see that they are clearly divided into two types. One type of armor has a blue lightning symbol on it, and most of them have a stronger body, while the other has a white corrugated symbol and is thinner. They are also the awakened androids, spiritual androids and electrical androids. Another teleportation, Roha appeared in the camp with 2 fully armed androids. Well, your batch starts here. Roha looked at Gilgamesh and Accelerator, who were standing beside him, and gave an order. Gilgamesh and Accelerator, you each took 4 androids to start the search. The map has been given to you, you must not be negligent. Got it. Accelerator responded impatiently, and immediately manipulated the atmosphere, wrapped the 4 androids, flew into the sky, and galloped away. HMPH, actually let this king do such a thing. Gilgamesh on the other side snorted coldly and summoned Vamana, the golden boat. Upon seeing this, the 4 androids immediately set off, preparing to board Vamana and leave with Gilgamesh. But just as they were about to board the ship, Gilgamesh suddenly crossed his arms and stopped in front of several people. Without waiting for the android to ask, Gilgamesh took out a large hanging basket for a hot air balloon from somewhere and threw it on the ground. At the same time as the hanging basket, there are several thick black metal chains. Cyborg. Gilgamesh gave a few androids a look of disgust, and his eyes were full of disdain. You guys, do you want to ride the Vamana with this king? Obediently tie up the basket and sit in the basket. Roha, my day, this Gilgamesh is insane. Although he complained about Gilgamesh's behavior, Roha ordered several androids to start tying up the hanging basket. Finally, watching the 4 androids get into the gondola, hang below Vamana, and slowly fly up, Roha's eyes twitched for a while. Gilgamesh's character is really incomprehensible. Is it that hard to let someone else ride in the same aircraft as you? Also get a hanging basket, Ma is not troublesome. Shaking his head and sighing, Roha no longer thought about Gilgamesh's behavior, but began to order the remaining androids. A few minutes later, the remaining androids scattered around in groups of 2. At the same time, one after another mental force field opened, exploring the surroundings. This is also the method that Roha came up with temporarily to find someone. By making the electrical androids and the spiritual androids cooperate with each other, a small mental stand can be created, which can achieve an effect similar to a miniature radar. Ordinary people and weak guys, of course, can't resist the mental force field of artificial humans. Only people with a certain level of strength can block the detection of mental force field, and the existence of their spiritual force may be Blackbeard. At that time, they will go to observe each other's appearance, and call their companions through telephone bugs and spiritual power to report to Gilgamesh and the 2. Watching the android unit disappear from sight, Roha pursed his lips and activated teleportation again. Even if Gilgamesh and Accelerator's mobility is amazing, with the android's mental force field, they can search a kingdom in just a few hours. But the new world is so big. With this person alone, trying to find Blackbeard is like finding a needle in a haystack. He also needs to send more android warriors to the new world. This time, the transportation was unimaginably long, and it lasted for half a day. During this time, Roha took 2 breaks because of the frequent use of ultra-long distance transportation. However, the effect was remarkable. He sent more than 500 androids to the new world. This is also all the 2 types of androids that Roha has accumulated so far. These more than 500 androids were originally made to accept the former chassis of the Beast Pirates and completely cover the Skynet. Roha did not expect that, before he started to control the site, he actually used this batch of artificial people. My darlings, don't let anything happen to you. Seeing the last batch of androids running towards the town, Roha couldn't help but whispered prayers in his heart. This group of androids can be said to be his little half of the family. They can't help but be complicated and expensive to manufacture. They are only the weakened version of the battle suits that are researched by Jaji, plus the spirit behind them. Electromagnetic amplification equipment. The manufacture of each set the cost is more than 50 million berry. Of course, with Elo's character, it was impossible for him to make a loss-making business. In the previous 590 test, there were only 2 groups of fully armed androids, relying on electrical androids, using weak electricity to stimulate muscles to achieve tyrannical physique, as well as various hallucinations and mental disturbances of mental androids as well as the special functions of the battle suit. It is enough to annihilate a small pirate group without injury, and can kill pirates with a bounty of more than 10 million berry. After the end of the first battle test, Tianjing Yashang and Jiaji even released a bold statement that with the strength of these 500 people, they could even subvert an ordinary kingdom in one day. A kingdom like Alabasta, with a small amount of abilities and warriors, could not last 3 days under their hands. And this is only 500 people. With Dream Magazine's increasing income and Tezolo's unrelenting support, one production line has already been completed, and an ultra-modern machinery factory has appeared under the 7 waters. As long as Roha is willing, the number of androids can be doubled. Of course, Roha didn't do that. Because in this world, it is the top powerhouses who really decide the right to speak. The androids are nothing but soldiers who maintain their rule. There were thousands of thoughts in his mind, and after Roha stopped for a long time, he got up and hurried to the north. The rest of the places can be handed over to Gilgamesh and the others to search, and there is one place for him to come in person. Chapter 254 G5, Virgo. It is a well-known fact that the world government that rules the world has the power to surpass the world. But in a world where the strong are like clouds, even the world government has no time to take care of it, and the new world, where the capable people walk all over the place and are as domineering as dogs, is the biggest piece of impossible land. Even if it is as strong as the world government, it has paid countless prices for hundreds of years, but it cannot establish a large ruling area in the new world. Only small branches can be established to maintain their final dignity. After the advent of the era of the great pirates, the 4 emperor pirates rose up one after another, encircling the ground, drawing prisons, and dividing the chassis. In this case, each naval branch naturally became a thorn in the side of the New World pirates. No 4 emperor pirates would allow a naval branch to exist on their own territory. Under the guidance and silent support of the 4 emperors, a large number of pirates began a mighty battle. One branch after another was ruthlessly destroyed, and thousands of navies died under the attack of pirates. In the end, the navy was on the sea, and only a few branches remained. Among the small branches that survived by chance, there is one branch that survived with solid achievements and the blood of pirates. It's called G5. As a powerful branch that has been attacked by countless pirates, in addition to its powerful strength, G5 has a military style that is completely different from all naval forces in the world. Cruel, bloody, powerful, shameless, don't obey orders, kill the pirates, backtrack, bully the soft and fear the hard, sneak attack from behind, blah blah blah. That's right, these characters that should be based on the pirates appeared perfectly in the Navy soldiers of the G5 branch, and because of this, the G5 was regarded as an outlier within the Navy. In the mouth of the pirates, the G5 Navy soldiers are called more pirates than pirates. Some people even joke that if the people in the G5 branch were not in the Navy and turned into pirates, their achievements would definitely be greater. At this moment, Roha, standing in the G5 branch town, really felt this bad atmosphere. For example, as it is now. Hey, stinky boy, sir, how about I ask you something else, do you hear me? Boy, you suddenly appeared just now and bumped into this uncle, causing me to break my pocket watch. You will lose money. That's right, your kid suddenly appeared and scared us, it's all your responsibility. 3 strong men dressed in simple clothes and covered with tattoos surrounded Roja, looking at Roja with a ferocious expression and a bad tone. Although these people acted like hooligans, Roja still noticed the identities of these people from the standard weapons carried by the other party. The rogue navy of the G5. Looking at the cracked pocket watch in one of the hands, Roja's expression was indifferent, and his eyes did not fluctuate. It seems, that thing was originally broken. Roja said lightly, and a dangerous light gradually rose in his eyes. That's right, although Roja suddenly appeared over the street through teleportation, and fell down, it startled a few navy, and the leader of them even slumped on the ground. But it wasn't until he stood up that he took out his pocket watch from his pocket. Broken. Did it break on his chubby belly? Obviously, this is a touch of porcelain and blackmail. You bastard, what are you talking about? Do you want to cheat? Bastard, you want it, we are the Navy. Do you understand the Navy? If you dare to play tricks with us, you will be arrested and locked up. Roja's words obviously pierced the pain of several Navy, making their scolding louder, so that there was a crowd of onlookers around, watching the Navy soldiers pointing, with a look of disgust. Looking at Roja there was a trace of sympathy in his eyes. However, no one stood up. Quack. Seeing a few Navy soldiers jumping up and down like clowns and roaring with blushing necks, Roja shook his head and took a slight step forward. This scum, it's better to die. But just when Roja raised his hand, he suddenly raised his brow and took his hand back. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time Roja closed his hand, 3 muffled sounds came in a row. The next moment, the 3 mighty naval soldiers squatted down with their heads covered and howling miserably. When they turned back and yelled, the person who beat them suddenly spoke. Hearing this person's voice, the 3 Navy soldiers shuddered subconsciously, and squatted down again with a smirk. I'm sorry, the rudeness of my subordinates is my dereliction of duty, please forgive me. If you need compensation, please feel free to bring it up and I will try my best to satisfy it. A tall and burly man wearing a plaid coat and sunglasses came to Roja, bowed slightly, and his words were full of apology. Looking at the weird stake on the other's face for a long time, Roja couldn't help hooking the corner of his mouth. Virgo, it's just. What is the structure of this face? Can it really stick to a stake and can't get rid of it even if you bow your head? Newton's coffin board is shaking, bro. Resisting the desire to take down the stake, Roja smiled lightly. I won't say sorry if I don't forgive. I want to see Lieutenant General Karp in case of compensation, okay? See Lieutenant General Karp. Roja's strange request made Virgo stunned for a moment, and subconsciously raised his head and looked at Roja. This is also the first time he has faced Roja's appearance. However, this sight made Virgo's legs tremble, and an extremely strong desire to escape instantly rose in his heart, and even a dark sheen appeared on the skin under his gloves. Roja, how did the people from the Dimension Brigade appear here? Virgo's heart is roaring, he can't imagine the reason why Roja came here, but when he thinks of Roja's terrifying power and various achievements, Virgo's eyes behind his sunglasses still raise a strong sense of vigilance. Color. Calm down, Virgo, calm down. You are not a senior cadre of the Don Quixote family now. Red Heart, Virgo, you are now a rear admiral, there is no reason to be afraid of people from the Dimension Brigade. Yes, that's it, calm down, no one but the Don Quixote family knows your true identity. Virgo took a few quick breaths, and the chaotic thoughts in his mind gradually calmed down. When Virgo was ready to deal with Roja, Roja's words broke his mood again. Mr. Hart, what's the matter? You don't want to lead the way for me? Chapter 255 Inches Hero, Garp. Hearts. Hearts. Red, heart. Virgo could no longer restrain the horror in his heart, and his poker face that had been straight all this time instantly turned into a horrified expression, looking at Roja in disbelief. You. Virgo raised his finger to Roja, wanting to ask how Roja knew, but just as his hand was raised, he retracted it like an electric shock. Noticing that Roja did not show an unpleasant expression because of this, Virgo breathed a sigh of relief and bowed respectfully to Roja. "Please come with me." The current Virgo, his mind is chaotic, like a lump of paste, unable to think at all. The only thing he can do is to lead the way for Roja first, and then think about countermeasures. "Then I'll trouble you." Roja smiled lightly and followed. When he walked to the side of the squatting Navy soldiers, Roja glanced at them subconsciously, and when he looked up, he happened to see Virgo hurriedly retracting his gaze. 577 But in his eyes, Roja still saw a murderous aura that had not dissipated. Of course Roja wouldn't think that Virgo's murderous intent was aimed at himself. He knew very well that Virgo's murderous intent was aimed at those 3 naval soldiers who, accidentally, heard the word, Red Heart. Maybe not long after, maybe right after Roja left, the 3 sailors would die in some kind of accident. But, what does that have to do with Roja? This kind of scum, it's not a pity to die. Don't worry, I didn't plan to tell anyone about your identity. I'm not interested in your lurking plan. Vilgaroa, who glanced at the stiff body beside him and walked slowly, said comfortably. Seeing that Virgo's body eased a little, Roja chuckled and said again, "But I'm very curious, as a fellow with Doflamingo, he once sat on the throne of Red Hearts, and he was placed in high hopes by Doflamingo. You who paid a high price to be placed in the Navy, do you know whether? Where is Doflamingo now?" Roja's words, like a thunderbolt, exploded in Virgo's mind, making his body that had just relaxed stiffened again, and his footsteps could not help but stop. Roja didn't ask any more questions, but hooked the corner of his mouth and looked at Virgo's funny posture with a light smile. Half a minute later, I don't know what Virgo wanted to understand, he suddenly let out a sigh of relief, and the whole person suddenly relaxed. Just when Roja was puzzled, Virgo suddenly turned his head, swept away the previous fear, and looked at Roja with a look that saw everything and understood everything. "I don't want to die," Virgo said. When Virgo finished speaking, Roja could feel that Virgo gave up all resistance gestures, and even the armed domineering that had covered his whole body was taken back by him, looking like he wanted to die. "Oh," Roja raised his eyebrows, looked straight at Virgo, narrowed his eyes, with a weird smile on his face, and did not speak. Until Virgo, who was watching, was soaked in cold sweat, Roja suddenly laughed twice and patted Virgo on the shoulder. "Don't say it, don't say it, don't make this look of dying, let's go, I want you to lead the way." Saying that, Roja pushed Virgo. Virgo, who was ready to be beheaded by Roja, was stunned by the sudden change. He looked at Roja in surprise and confirmed that Roja was not joking. His legs softened and he almost knelt down, fell to the ground. But soon, he braced himself up and obediently led the way in front of him, and he didn't speak until he brought Roja to Karp's office. "It's here, I'll retire first." Virgo bowed respectfully to Roja, then turned and left. When Virgo walked around the corner, he even ran away, as if there were floods and beasts chasing him behind him. Hearing Virgo's chaotic footsteps, Roja couldn't help but laugh. Speaking of which, he still admires Virgo. In addition to Virgo's strength, what Roja really appreciates is his loyalty and his attitude of absolute obedience. With Virgo's strength, he can lead a pirate group by himself, be a blessing, and even say that when he returns to the 4 seas, he can become the king of a kingdom, and he can follow Doflamingo for the last time. Prosperity and wealth. But he didn't. Because of Doflamingo's plan, because of Doflamingo's dream, Virgo gave up everything he once had without hesitation, dived into the Navy and became an undercover agent. Even in the original book, even if Luoda split 8 pieces and detonated a bomb to death, he didn't have any complaints, and he still greeted death calmly and accepted everything. Of course, even if Roja appreciates Virgo again, Virgo cannot escape the fate of death. Because what Doflamingo has done has exceeded Roja's bottom line, so Doflamingo must die. Virgo, the daddy of Doflamingo, must also die. It's just that, Not now. What Roja really needs to deal with now is the man in the office in front of him. The man who is the strongest in the Navy and is known as the hero of the Navy. Tekken, Garp. Boom, boom, boom. Roja knocked on the delicate carved door in front of him. Chapter 256. I've become stupid, I've become stronger. Dong dong dong. The knock on the door sounded, and Roja stood quietly, thinking about how to talk to Garp. However, when the ideas in his mind have gradually been perfected, there is still no sound from the door. With a frown, Roja stepped forward a little and leaned his ear against the door to listen. Inside the door, there was a faint rhythmic sound, like snoring. The corners of his mouth twitched twice, and Roja was no longer polite. He pushed open the door and walked in. As soon as he entered the door, Roja saw Garp lying on the desk, covered by a thick pile of documents, and sleeping soundly. Glancing at the saliva-soaked document under Garp, Roja sighed and patted Garp's desk. Cap, Lieutenant General Garp. Wake up, Garp. The helplessness on Roja's face grew stronger. What kind of person is this? He can't even wake up. In the end, Roja even walked behind the desk and pushed Garp directly. However, still nothing happens. Hash 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 hash. Lieutenant General Garp, the Warring States Marshal is here. Roja suddenly shouted. Where is the Warring States? Captain jumped up and accidentally bumped into the pile of documents beside him, and suddenly countless documents were spilled on the ground, messy. Crap! Garp exclaimed, and squatted down to collect the documents. After a while, he stood up, put the documents on the table, and sighed in relief. Fortunately it wasn't broken. Garp wiped his sweat, then turned to look at Roja. That guy in the Warring States, where is he now? Halfway through the words, he frowned suddenly and looked at Roja. You are. Garp pointed at Roja with an exaggerated expression. Looking at the Navy hero with a surprised look, Roja was overjoyed at first, and then suddenly remembered Garp's character, and suddenly a deep sense of powerlessness came to his heart. Because he knew that Garp stammered not because of surprise, but because. Roja, my name is Roja. Roja held his forehead with a helpless look on his face. Oh yes, Roja, why are you here? Garp looked suddenly enlightened, without any embarrassed expression on his face. How on earth did this guy become a hero? He chased Roger for so many years. Could it be that he exchanged his brain for strength and luck? Roja thought, CQ. Is this the legend? I've become stupid, but also stronger. Kai. Roja didn't know his thoughts at this time had already reached some kind of consensus with a group of Garp colleagues, including Sengoku. They also felt that Garp put the talent in his brain on his strength. How do I feel? You are thinking of something unpleasant. Garp looked at Roja suspiciously. No. Roja chuckled twice, waved his hand, and sat on the sofa in the office casually, not treating himself as an outsider at all. Seeing that Roja unceremoniously picked up the senbei on the table and ate it, Garp blinked and said nothing. Originally, with his character, he would not care about such trivial matters, not to mention that in the case of the East China Sea, Roja also helped him a lot. Although the result was not satisfactory, it finally allowed him to avoid the red-haired pirates. The war began, saving the lives of many Navy. As a matter of fact, Garp has no reason to be dissatisfied. So, what are you here for? Garp sat on the table casually, staring at Roja, feeling a little uneasy in his heart. Although the Dimension Brigade has been benefiting the society and annihilating pirates so far, it has never made any move against the world government. But Garp can't forget that every time the members of the Dimension Brigade leave the Seven Waters, something big will happen. In the capital of Seven Waters, Gilgamesh slashed the sea, Accelerator seriously injured Jack. Donghae intervenes in the battle between Garp and the Redhead. Beihai crushed the Don Quixote family and seized the fruit of the operation. In the New World, destroy all the beast pirates and create the Jedi of Death. In addition, such as the influence of various comics, the effect of Skynet, and the countless swordsmen awakened by Dugu sword art are also things done by the Dimensional Brigade. Such a powerful and unparalleled group. Every time there must be a big event, how can Garp not worry about the other party's purpose? And it's not just Garp who is worried about the purpose of the Dimensional Brigade. Inside the Navy, there are also many people who are worried about the existence of the Dimensional Brigade. They even say that within the Navy, there has long been a Dimensional Brigade threat theory. Ellipsis. 9 flowers. Advocate the threat theory of the Dimensional Brigade, will advise the warring states whenever they have the opportunity, wanting to annihilate the Dimensional Brigade in one fell swoop and get rid of this confidant. Whenever someone made this suggestion, Garp could see Sengoku sighing silently in secret, looking full of sorrow. Garp also asked Sengoku what he was thinking, but the reply from Sengoku so far made him unable to forget it. Cap, what we believe in is justice, and we are only enemies of evil, and the Dimension Brigade, before they make trouble, I will not move them, nor will I allow others to move. Ignorance of justice, but because of this, Garp, Sengoku and others can get to where they are today because of their persistence. Purpose. Luoya smiled and put the last piece of senbei into his mouth, took another sip of tea, and said with a smile, I want the G5 branch to hand over Marco to me. Yes, that's exactly what Roha came here for. In the range given by Skynet, the probability of the G5 branch secretly receiving Blackbeard and Marco can be ranked first in all locations. However, the defenders of the G5 branch were a problem. Kizaru had switched back to Marin Vando as early as half a month ago, leaving only Garp here. But when it comes to principle, Garp is notoriously difficult to speak. This can be seen from the original book that he would rather watch Ace go to the guillotine than open his mouth to object. Justice is Garp's greatest belief. You know what you're talking about. Sure enough, when he heard Roha's words, Garp swept away the smile on his face. His face suddenly darkened, he jumped off the table, his face was gloomy, and he looked straight at Roha. A heavy depression, like the pressure of Mount High, suddenly appeared in the room and spread out towards the surrounding. The air seemed to be gradually condensing. At this time, Garp was just standing in front of Roha, but in Roha's perception, Garp's figure seemed to be magnified thousands of times, like a titan who woke up from an ancient slumber, standing in front of him, covering the sky and the sun. Chapter 257 Remnants of Old Times. The atmosphere in the room was extremely dignified, even if it was dozens of meters away from the office. A Navy could not help but covered his chest and had difficulty breathing. In the room, looking at Garp who looked like, if you don't speak clearly, you won't want to leave today, Roha shook his head lightly. Alright, let's have a fight first, and everyone will be able to vent their energy before they can talk. Roha clapped the residue of the senbei on his hand and stood up, the sword intent that was boiling because of Garp's fighting intent, billowing out. The invisible airflow rose out of thin air around Roha, and the sword chi that spilled out in the air danced around him. The extravagant bearskin carpet under his feet was cracked, as if it had been slashed by a sharp sword. What the hell are you doing? Perceiving the amazing sword intent on Roha's body, Garp shrank his pupils and shouted loudly. Although I can't wait to capture Roha immediately and interrogate the other party's purpose, there is always a lingering depression in Garp's heart, which makes her not dare to shoot easily. I'll talk about what I want to do for a while. Now, I just want to see how strong Garp, who is known as a naval hero, is really. Can you really let me have a good time? Roha's eyes exuded a raging fighting intent, and the Overlord domineering subconsciously was inspired by him, sweeping all over the world, all the surrounding spaces. The sound of the end sounded one after another, and then, outside the office, there were bursts of exclamations. Immediately afterwards, a piercing alarm sounded throughout the G5 branch, and dazzling red light filled every street. This is the highest level of alert. It means that the entire branch is facing a crisis of destruction. It's just that, unlike the suddenly tense atmosphere outside, the atmosphere in the room has eased slightly. Go out, you must not dare to do your best here. Roja glanced at the panicked naval soldiers outside the window and said casually. Yeah. Carp nodded solemnly, with a hint of gratitude and appreciation in his eyes. Garp didn't dare to do it just now, because they were in the center of the branch. If Garp fought Roja here, with the power of the two to slaughter the city and destroy the country, I am afraid that after the war, the G5 branch will also completely disappear in this world. Take it. Roja nodded lightly, and without waiting for Garp, jumped out of the windowsill, and stepped on the air, running towards the distance. Moon Step, B.U. As early as after the battle with Kaido, Roja ordered someone from the members in the Seven Waters to forcibly trade the training method of the Navy's 6th Style W, and he has achieved a little so far. And the most useful one for him is this month's step. Looking at Roja, who was running in the air in surprise, Carp frowned and immediately followed. Even Garp himself didn't notice, because Roja was concerned about the attitude of the people around him before, so the hostility to Roja in his heart has dissipated a lot. Otherwise, as long as Roja threatens the lives of all the members of the G5 branch, with Garp's character, he will definitely agree to the transaction. A mere Marco and a wicked Blackbeard, in Garp's eyes, the lives of ordinary people are not worth much. Of course, whether Garp would suddenly catch up and kill a few people afterwards is another matter. The two men with raging fighting spirit did not notice that under the sky they were passing by, there was a figure standing in the Naval Academy, looking up at them. Are these two going to fight? Virgo murmured as he looked at the two who gradually turned into black spots. It was not until Roja and the two disappeared from his sight that Virgo's body relaxed, and after a few rapid breaths, Virgo's face showed a self-deprecating look. Too weak, he is too weak. In vain, when he wanted to kill Roja when Roja killed him, he suddenly broke out and died with Roja. Now that he thinks about it, it is simply a nonsense. I am afraid that Roja has already discovered his actions, but he has not broken it, just like an adult watching a child play with his mind in front of him, with a joking mentality. But if the child dares to do bad things, the adults don't mind to discipline them. Dover, in a world with this kind of monster, how on earth are you going to destroy it? Virgo looked at the direction where Roja and the two disappeared, his eyes melancholy. In the distance, the two Rojas with amazing speed soon came to a beach on the edge of the island where the G5 branch is located. It's right here. Roja looked around, and after confirming that no one was there, he took out Muramasa from the storage space and slowly pulled it out. Garp on the other side, silently, casually threw his navy cloak on the ground, took off his shirt, and left only a vest and trousers, and took up a fighting stance. Then you're welcome. Roja's face showed a frenzied expression, his body bowed slightly, and the next moment, it shot out like a bomb. In the fully open state, he even pulled out a long sand wave on the beach, like a sharp blade splitting the waves, and suddenly rushed forward. Almost in an instant, Roja crossed a distance of tens of meters, and suddenly appeared in front of Garp, holding a knife in both hands, with a force to smash Mount Wa, and slammed it down. At this time, the yellow sand that flew up because of his start was still flying in the air. Little devil, if you want to fight me, you are still early. In the face of Roja's astonishing speed, after a brief surprise, Garp also showed an excited expression on his face. His right fist was pitch black, with a real wind and waves, tore the air, and slammed out. Boom! Swept out horizontally 2.1 all around like a sickle. The two people who collided, after a short stalemate, invariably pulled back their strength, and then a more violent attack blasted out again. Amid the continuous explosions, the showdown at the top of the world begins. Remnants of the old era, representing the highest combat power of the Navy, who chased Roger the Pirate King, trained the General Aokiji, and fought the hero, Garp all over the world with a pair of iron fists. The pioneer of the new era, he overwhelmed the world's largest swordsman, slaughtered the beasts Kaido, and was determined to be the world's Roja. The peak figures of the two eras, with high respect for each other, started a duel. And just when the two were dueling, on a desert island more than 100 nautical miles away from the G5 branch, two people who were enough to be called heroes were finally about to meet. Chapter 258 In the Shadows. In an open space deep in the jungle, a small camp appeared at some point. 4 or 5 people were sitting around the extinguished bonfire. Behind them, there was another person who was bound by chains and lying on the ground, guarded by 2 people. Not far away, there was a man wearing a white robe and a white monkey face mask, walking around anxiously. Bastard! What the hell is going on? How can the Dimension Brigade appear in the New World at this time? And there are hundreds of people at once. Even 3 cadres came. Gilgamesh, Accelerator and Roha. Fuck, are they going to fight a world war, or are they going to annihilate which 4 Emperor pirates? The monkey-faced man seemed to be insane, roaring in a low voice as he walked. Boss, they don't necessarily come to us, don't worry so much. A man sitting by the bonfire and wearing a clown mask spoke comfortingly. Not for us, not for us, but what if they came for us? Comforted, the monkey-faced man became even more mad. He rushed in front of the clown man, held the clown man by the collar, and roared. What if they came for us? Are you fighting them, or am I fighting them? Huh. Don't come early, don't come late. The guy from the Warring States period has to come when the announcement is made, and he is still scrambling around looking for someone, who is not looking for us. Do you know how many pirates were killed and how many underground forces headquarters did those lawless bastards kill in one day? More than 400. Just from what we know, they killed more than 400 pirates, and there are 7 who have a bounty of over 100 million. 4 of them were directly shot by Gilgamesh. The rest, the next 2 were beaten to death by Accelerator. The last one was besieged to death by the group of people in black. Because of this, the underground forces in the first half of the New World are now afraid to act, you know. All the pirates did not dare to resist when they saw them, and they just accepted the inspection, you know. How can I calm down? The monkey-faced man's roaring voice echoed in the jungle for a long time. After a short breath, he stood up and walked to the corner of the camp with a cold face. There was a tall, slightly bloated middle-aged man with a rough face, sitting under a tree, with his head lowered, and fiddling with his hands. Between his hands, a strange black layer could be faintly seen. Things, like gases. Hey, do you know what's going on? Why did the Dimension Brigade suddenly riot? They've never done anything like this before. The monkey-faced man angrily patted the tree trunk behind the middle-aged man. There was no respect in his tone, but a contemptuous tone. Hearing the monkey-faced man's question, the middle-aged man took the black gas in his hand back into his body, raised his head, and opened his mouth, revealing a mouth that was missing a few teeth. I don't know either, maybe they have a deal with Whitebeard. CP0 members that Blackbeard had already contacted. As early as in the Whitebeard Pirates, Blackbeard began to imagine how to find a way back and avoid Whitebeard's pursuit after obtaining the Dark Fruit. Naturally, the navy that was able to force the Whitebeard pirates into his sights, and the newly introduced Chiwahai policy allowed him to open up a justifiable bright road for him. After receiving the news of the Dark Fruit and arriving with Marco in the virgin forest where the Dark Fruit is hidden, Blackbeard contacted the top management of CP0 through underground channels and paid a huge price. Although he has paid the wealth he has accumulated for most of his life, he can only pass messages to the senior management of CP0 through people, but fortunately, the conditions proposed by Blackbeard are very attractive, and it just so happens that most of the members of CP0 also happen to be tracking Dofrin in the New World. Brother Ming and others, the high-level people agreed with Blackbeard logically. As soon as he catches Marco, members of CP0 seek the Shichibukai position for him and help him talk to Sengoku. After that, the matter was very simple. After Blackbeard kidnapped Marco, he immediately contacted the people of CP0. Afterwards, Blackbeard and CP0's team that was in charge of the response converged. Following the guidance of the Warring States period, they came all the way here. As long as G5's response ship arrives, they can go to Marin Vando under the escort of Garp, and arrange for the Whitebeard pirates' Heaven and Earth network. But now all plans have been disrupted. The sudden appearance of the Dimension Brigade made CP0 Feet's command system a mess. The battle between Roja and Karp put the G5 branch on the highest alert, and the whole island entered a state of martial law. In this case, no ship was able to approach the G5 branch, and likewise, no ship was able to leave without the order of Supreme Commander Garp. It's bad now. The monkey-faced man saw that he couldn't ask anything from Blackbeard's side, so he beat his head in distress and left. The Blackbeard behind him looked at the back of the monkey-faced man thoughtfully. As a former member of the Whitebeard Pirates 353, of course Blackbeard knew that the dark fruit was a treasure named by the Dimensional Brigade. In his mind, the Dimensional Brigade should also act like this because of the dark fruit. Hey, unfortunately, the dark fruit has already been eaten by me. Even if I find it, it will be useless. Blackbeard laughed twice, secretly observing the surrounding situation. The fruit of darkness has been obtained, and the order of Chihuahai has been prepared. As long as he goes to Marin Fando, he can get it. In this case, Marco is useless, and Blackbeard naturally has no reason to stay here any longer. He was ready to run away. After all, the current Dimensional Brigade is still an unprovoked object for him. However, Blackbeard believes that when he is fully familiar with the ability of the dark fruit, it is not impossible to win a group of men and fight with the Dimensional Brigade. However, just as Blackbeard was about to slip away quietly, there was a sudden commotion in the camp. CP0 members wearing white robes jumped up and looked vigilant. Watch out! Someone is coming. 3 on the left, 2 on the right, front, more front. Protect Marco, the rest are ready to meet the enemy. Chapter 259 Unexpected Chaser. In the camp, there was a panic. Not only the members of CP0, but even the black ones would inevitably panic. I just finished talking about the Dimensional Brigade. Could it be that they were found so quickly? Panic emotions pervaded everyone's heart. And Marco, who was lying on the ground, was guarded by several people in the center, and raised his head slightly, looking forward to the jungle in the distance. Swish! The trembling sound of the bushes being trampled resounded around, and the dense sound made people panic. One after another, black shadows gradually appeared in the sight of everyone, and they came from all directions of the camp. Ji Dong. Blackbeard swallowed a saliva subconsciously, his eyes wandering around incessantly, looking for a route to escape. In his plan, it will take at least a few years before he can face off against the Dimensional Brigade, and there is no certainty of victory. Now, too early. It won't be so bad luck. Blackbeard muttered to himself, seeing the shadows around him about to come out, his heartbeat couldn't help speeding up a little. Click, click. Accompanied by the sound of stepping on dead branches and gravel. The surrounding enemies finally appeared in front of everyone. Right in front of them walked out, was a blond man wearing a pink feather coat and sunglasses with a proud face. Immediately afterwards, people with different complexions and strange clothes walked out of the jungle. A rock giant dozens of meters high, a sturdy old man in tights, a masked man in black with a silver-haired broom, and a plump man with long blonde hair and scantily clad. One after another, enemies with powerful aura surrounded the camp, killing intent lingering. Huh? What's the matter with you? Oh my shit, it scared me to death. When seeing the enemy that finally appeared, the members of CP0 were not afraid, but widened their eyes, full of disbelief, and then ecstatic expressions appeared on their faces. The sound of relief sounded all over the camp, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Because, the people who came were not the Dimensional Brigade, but the Don Quixote family. Doflamingo stepped out of the jungle aggressively, and before he could speak, he saw the expressions on the faces of the CP0 members in the camp who survived the catastrophe. He even said that on some people's faces, he also saw joy. What is the situation? Doflamingo was a little stunned. Didn't they come to ambush? Why did the enemy have a happy expression when they saw them? Doflamingo, who has been taking all the cadres to track the trail of Blackbeard, is far less well informed than CP0, and naturally does not know that the Dimensional Brigade suddenly invaded the New World. Therefore, he simply cannot understand the mood of the CP0 members at the moment. Do it. Doflamingo breathed a sigh of relief after seeing Marco, who was unharmed in the back, and he immediately gave an order. At the same time, a bunch of intertwined threads suddenly appeared in his hands. Afterwards, the ability was activated, and countless silk threads were like half a volcano erupting, straight into the sky, and when they reached a certain height, they began to fall towards the surroundings. A few seconds later, a birdcage made of ability-generating threads appeared on the island, covering a space of several kilometers. Doflamingo will wipe out the members of CP0 from the very beginning. Go all out and kill them all as soon as possible. The monkey-faced man headed by CP0 glanced at the birdcage in the sky in horror, and then a furious expression appeared on his face. Such a big birdcage, the target is really too big. If you don't clear it quickly, people from the Dimension Brigade will soon come to the door. That's right, in the heart of the monkey-faced man, the Don Quixote family was never in his heart from the very beginning. As the strongest espionage agency of the world government, they never thought that their strength would be weaker than the Don Quixote family. Humph! When Doflamingo heard the monkey-faced man's order, he snorted coldly, killing intent in his eyes. If it was the four Emperor's pirates and the Dimensional Brigade, he would step back 100 miles and dare not touch them. But, CP0. What is that? With a cold face, Brother Doflamingo grinned, and suddenly pressed his palm on the tree beside him. Shield white line. The next moment, something strange happened. The tree that was more than 10 meters tall instantly turned into countless white silk threads, and then the silk threads rushed forward like a wave, easily blocking the attacks of several CP0 members. Swept away again towards the surrounding CP0 members. The face of the incoming attack, most of the CP0 members chose to avoid the edge for a while. However, there was still a strong CP0 member wearing a ghost mask. Because his actions were not agile enough to dodge, he could only choose hard resistance. Iron rock. A metallic luster suddenly appeared on the grimace man's body, covering his entire body in an instant. At the same time, the ground under his feet even showed traces of cracks. Iron and rock. Navy 6th form, an advanced skill for iron blocks. Not only can it give the defense power far beyond the iron block, it can also increase the body weight, strengthen the development, and move like a mountain. However, even so, this member of CP0 only resisted for less than a second, and then he was suddenly turned into a sword-shaped top line and pushed into the air, and there was faint blood flowing out of his abdomen. This is Devil Fruit Awakening. Struggling to move backwards, the monkey-faced man barely escaped the overwhelming line. Looking at the crisscrossing in the jungle, broken trees when encountering trees, broken stones, terrifying string posts, the contempt on the monkey-faced man's face, I don't know when it disappeared, replaced by a deep and solemn color. As the secret highest intelligence agency directly under the Kai government, of course he knows about the Fruit Awakening, and even said that among his team members, there are animal-type Fruit Awakeners. But he never imagined that Brother Doflamingo would wake up. Scoff. Just when the monkey-faced man was concentrating, a string like a long whip suddenly shot from the ground, and came to the monkey-faced man in an instant. Damn it! The monkey-faced man's expression tightened, and he didn't dare to care anymore. As soon as his mind moved, countless white shadows flew out from under the monkey-faced man's robe, and stopped in front of him layer by layer, instantly forming a huge shield to protect him. Boom! The string post and the shield collided suddenly, making a muffled sound, and the unfavorable string finally stopped. Chapter 260 Paper Fruit. Oh, you're also a devil fruit person. The cautious Doflamingo did not choose to pursue, but retracted the silk thread and let the silk thread wander around like a giant python. He himself looked at the monkey-faced man with great interest. There are too many types of devil fruits in this world. Even though Brother Doflamingo is very confident in the power of his own fruit awakening, he still doesn't dare to care about it. After all, the abilities of some fruits are really unreasonable. The monkey-faced man didn't answer. Beneath his robe, a vast white shadow still flew out, floating around him like a bird. Not only that, there are also a large number of white shadows scattered around, pouring into the battlefield, sneaking under the robes of the CP0 members, and disappearing. At first, the people of the Don Quixote family didn't care about these white shadows, until Gradius hit a CP0 member with a mine bomb, and blew his robe into pieces. They were surprised to find out those white shadows actually stick closely to the CP0 members, like armor, which greatly strengthens the CP0 members' defense. At this time, Doflamingo finally saw Bai Ying's true face. That turned out to be a piece of white paper 217. Seeing this, Doflamingo raised his eyebrows and looked at the monkey-faced man. After the awakening of his fruit, the attack power of the silk thread was actually able to be defended by the white paper. The monkey-faced man must have developed the fruit to a very high degree. I am afraid that the strength of his white paper is no less than that of his silk thread. Plus, the defense is even more amazing. On the other side, the monkey-faced man did not face Doflamingo until he made a set of paper armor for himself. The monkey-faced man at this time has become like a European knight, shrouded in huge white paper armor. Yes, as you can see, I am the paper man of the paper fruit. Can manipulate and strengthen all paper. Are you going to fight now, Doflamingo? The monkey-faced man in the armor let out a low and stern shout. His body was amazing. And those CP0 members who were endowed with strong defensive capabilities by his blank paper, even more soaring, and gradually suppressed the cadres of the Don Quixote family. Wah wah wah, interesting, it's actually paper. Doflamingo laughed twice. His aura increased rather than decreased. You are paper. I am thread, but don't forget, thread can be cut. Before he finished speaking, the monkey-faced man had a big warning sign in his heart. Before he could react, the white paper floating around him was cut into 2 pieces, and even on his armor, there were fine gaps, vaguely. You can see that there are thin lines stuck in the armor. Doflamingo even took advantage of the time he was talking to lay a trap. Give me death. In the distance, Doflamingo's stern shout came. When the monkey-faced man reacted, the super strike whip had hit the armor on his chest. The endless battle is on again. The 2 groups of people who were immersed in the slaughter did not notice that the Blackbeard who had been staying in the corner had disappeared. On the top of the mountain thousands of meters away from the battlefield, Blackbeard held a telescope and watched Doflamingo's frantic eruption with a solemn expression. Around Doflamingo, everything within a radius of dozens of meters has been assimilated into lines by him. Boundless silk threads soared into the air, like a man devouring giant python, traversing the entire battlefield. Not only that, but Blackbeard even discovered that another Doflamingo appeared on the battlefield, constantly assisting the members of the Don Quixote family who were at a disadvantage. Seeing that brother Doflamingo turned the tide of the battle by himself, Blackbeard's face was a little unsightly. What the hell is going on with the Don Quixote family? Does Marco have anything to do with them? Or, they want to make a fuss with Marco? Blackbeard rubbed his chin with a thoughtful look on his face. Threatening the Whitebeard pirates with Marco in exchange for something? No, it's impossible, even if he is a superhuman fruit awakener, but based on this strength, it is not enough for the Whitebeard pirates to see, and the captains can kill him without Whitebeard's shot. Then, apart from this reason, I am afraid there is only that. Save Marco, befriend the Whitebeard pirates, and seek refuge. Recalling the situation after the Don Quixote family robbed the dynamite rock, the more Blackbeard thought about it, the more likely it was. Now that he has figured out the reason for Doflamingo's actions, Blackbeard is not in a hurry. He picks up the wine bottle around his waist and takes a big gulp. Fight, fight, hurry up and finish the fight, I can go. Blackbeard laughed, picking up binoculars from time to time to take a look at the battlefield in the distance. Whether it is the failure of the Don Quixote family or the death of the CP0 people, it has nothing to do with him. Now Blackbeard just wants these two groups to finish the fight as soon as possible, so that he can go out. Looking up at the birdcage above his head, Blackbeard spit in disgust. What the hell, what the hell? As early as after leaving the battlefield just now, Blackbeard tried to break the birdcage and escape. But he never imagined that he couldn't break this ghost, but was cut by the birdcage, and he rolled all over the ground in pain, so embarrassed. Thinking of the piercing pain just now, Blackbeard couldn't help grinning, feeling uncomfortable for a while. There are too few records about the ability of the dark fruit. Even Blackbeard did not know that the dark fruit had such a pitiful effect before eating the fruit. That's absorbing damage and then doubling the pain. This effect is really uncomfortable. Blackbeard took another sip of wine with a depressed look on his face. As a natural fruit, it's okay to not be able to elementalize it. After all, the other abilities of the dark fruit are too abnormal, but what the hell are the side effects of absorbing damage? Can't stand it at all, okay. It was so painful. Pit father. Depressed, Blackbeard couldn't help but take a gulp of wine again, watching the fight in the distance like he was watching a play. At this moment, no one noticed, and at some point, a golden streamer passed over the island. Then, Jin Guang suddenly stopped. After a few seconds, the golden streamer turned and flew straight towards the island.